Chapter 909. No matter what, kissing someone in public was too shocking. Just from the expression of the female host, it was obvious how much of an impact this matter had on them. Actually, even the bodyguard who had been by Qin Mo's side for a long time was shocked, but he didn't show it. But young master, what would madam and boss think if they saw you like this? It was obvious that Qin Mo was declaring his sovereignty. It was probably because of a certain sentence in the livestream room. He might as well let the people in the industry know that this wasn't a figment of his imagination. This person belonged to him. His fingers stroked that smooth chin again. Qin Mo watched the youngster's eyes, recalling the way she had sat lazily eating her biscuits. She had been so obedient and he had wanted to pinch her. It was clear that a light kiss wasn't enough for Qin Mo. He grabbed the youngster's wrist and walked towards the corridor. Bo Jio watched his movements. "What are you doing? Aren't you going to the toilet?" Qin Mo replied nonchalantly. He brought Bo Jio into a dead end. Bo Jio wasn't dumb, this didn't look like a toilet. But when she glanced up, before she could say a word, she was pushed against the wall. The next moment, a fragrant kiss came. This time, Qin Mo's strength was obviously different. Reaching out, he pressed the youth's waist down and forcefully pried open those light pink lips, inhaling the sweet breath, not even letting go of the tip of the lilac tongue. Bo Jio knew that she wasn't as skilled as the Almighty in this aspect. Her mind went blank. She couldn't tell where the numbness came from, but in that instant, her legs went limp. When the hands reached into his t-shirt, his waist trembled heavily. It turned into a puddle of water. Fortunately, after the kiss, the man caught her, moving closer to her ear. His warm breath was scorching. "You are really sensitive." Bo Jio's ears turned red, but she didn't have the strength to move. Qin Mo seized this opportunity. He watched as the youngster's eyes turned red from the kiss. His eyes darkened, and he pressed her tighter against him. He gave her another round of deep kisses until the back of the youngster's ears turned an alluring pink. Qin Mo then stopped. He pressed the youngster into his arms, his breathing becoming slightly heavy. Bo Jio knew better than anyone else what it looked like when the Almighty was moved. Their breaths were filled with each other's breaths. The most awkward thing was that it was seen by the same person again. Lin Feng also felt that he really should buy a lottery ticket today to try his luck. Why was it that no matter where he went, he could see Little Spade and Captain kissing? The main thing was that the two of them acted as if nothing had happened. The captain glanced sideways and glanced at him. It was obvious that he was the one who had disturbed them. Bo Jio had been feeling gloomy, but when she saw Lin Feng's frown, she broke into a smile. She lifted her hand and placed it on his shoulder, smiling playfully at him. Lin Feng felt that it was a provocation. Wasn't it just two guys kissing? He was used to it and that was it. As a straight man, he had to suppress the discomfort in his heart in order to be manly and free. "Captain, the entire team has gathered and we are heading to the nightclub to celebrate. They asked me to get you guys. Captain, you guys? Come over once you're done kissing." With that, Lin Feng turned and walked away as though there was a terrifying beast behind him. Qin Mo retracted his gaze and placed it on the hand on his shoulder. He said slowly, "It seems like someone hasn't had enough kissing." Bo Jio obviously knew who he was referring to. In order to prevent the Almighty from catching her again, she bent down sharply and leaped out suavely. Qin Mo glanced at his empty hand, his beautiful thin lips lifting playfully. He walked over as well. Compared to the previous time, Lin Feng's reaction was much more normal. At the very least, he didn't study Yunhu. Supreme Alliance was rich. Everyone in the esports industry knew that. Besides, Supreme Alliance's style had always been to play however they wanted once they won the competition. Besides, they had a smiling director like Feng Yi. All of them boarded the commercial car and returned to the hotel for a short break before having a sumptuous meal. Next, they took the high-speed rail back to Jiang City. It was barely 10 p.m. If they didn't go to the nightclub at this hour, it would be a waste of their hard work. Those were Lin Feng's words. Supreme Alliance went to the Jiang family's territory, the most luxurious card room near the stage. There were more than 10 bottles of champagne opened. At the start, Shui Yaoyao didn't know they were going to this nightclub. It was only after he arrived that he stopped in his tracks. This was the Jiang family's business after all. She knew a little. She was afraid she would see that person. Bo Jiao seemed to have sensed Shui Yaoyao's thoughts. She turned, her hands still stuffed into her pockets arrogantly. There was a unique gentleness in her voice. It's fine for everyone to come together unless the Jiang family doesn't want to do business. Or is there something going on between you and Jiang Zhua? Shui Yaoyao was stunned. She immediately denied, no, nothing. She wasn't suited for lying. When she replied, her gaze seemed to waver. Bo Jiao was just testing the waters. She frowned when she saw Shui Yaoyao's reaction. Then she smiled. Don't be nervous, I was just saying. Let's go and celebrate. Shui Yaoyao nodded. She was still a little nervous. There were some things she didn't want Her Highness Jiao to know. From the beginning until now, she had caused enough trouble for His Highness Jiao. This kind of thing was ultimately her own decision, so it was better not to say it out loud. But there was one thing. Shui Yaoyao said in a low voice, 2 days ago, when I was at the Jiang family, I heard that Miss Wu was investigating you. She even wanted to contact Almighty Qin. Your Highness Jiao, why don't you stay in the same room with me for the rest of the competition? I'm afraid that Almighty Qin will notice something. Bo Jiao glanced over and smiled lightly. The Almighty already knows. He already knows? Shui Yaoyao stilled. What was going on? Bo Jiao continued. There are also some spectators that came to watch the competition. Spectators? Shui Yaoyao's eyes were filled with worry. You mean the fans? What about them? Bo Jiao paused. They promised to keep it a secret for me. But some things will be revealed sooner or later. I still have to deal with Fu Zhongyi. Once I'm done with him... Bo Jiao paused. She glanced up and smiled. Yao Yao, it seems like this free brother of yours has many female friends. She was changing the topic. In the past, Shui Yaoyao's first reaction would be to look at the man surrounded by beauties. But this time, Shui Yaoyao could hear the hidden meaning behind Her Highness Jiao's words. What would happen after she dealt with Fu Zhongyi? What was she going to do? Shui Yaoyao wasn't stupid. She understood the meaning behind her words. She had always felt that Her Highness Jiao was different from the people around her. She didn't look like an ordinary high school student. She didn't look like one at all. But even if she didn't look like one, it didn't change the fact that she was a high school student. Because the Supreme Alliance members hadn't entered. Just then, Qin Mo's phone rang. It was a school director on the phone. The headmaster replied tactfully, I guess that young Master Qin should have reached Jiang City after the competition. That's why I called to ask about your brother. In the second half of the second semester of Year 2, the school will require all students to stay on campus. Student Fu Jiao hasn't completed the procedure yet. Required to stay on campus? Qin Mo frowned. In the male dormitory? The headmaster replied immediately, that's right. You lived there before and should know that the dormitory conditions in our school aren't bad. Even though it's 6 people per room, there's plenty of space. Qin Mo's voice was calm. It isn't convenient for him to stay on campus. The headmaster opened his mouth. But in the second half of the semester, the pressure from studying will increase. If he doesn't stay on campus, the night self-study session, I'll tutor him personally. Qin Mo's voice didn't change. He won't do too badly. As for the night self-study session, when will it start? I'll send him there and let him come back after class. Since young Master Qin had already said that, he couldn't find anything else to insist on. After all, young Master Qin was considered half a parent. He had even attended the parent-teacher conference previously. The headmaster hung up the phone silently. He couldn't understand why young Master Qin didn't allow student Fu Jiao to stay on campus. He was clearly a student who stayed on campus in the past. Qin Mo hung up the phone as well. He glanced at the youngster who was looking at him and arched a brow. Bo Jiao heard someone mention her name over the phone. Her thin lips curved upwards. She was too handsome. Standing in the middle of the nightclub, there were already many girls who were looking back. Qin Mo took in all the admiring gazes and scoffed in his heart. With such an alluring appearance, of course he couldn't put her in the male dormitory where they lived together. A certain someone was only suitable to stay by his side and watch him. That was indeed the case. However, the youngster seemed to be born for this kind of place. Her entire being blended into the darkness. In order to prevent any negative effects, the Supreme Alliance members had already changed their team uniforms to their private uniforms when they were in the hotel. At this moment, Bo Jio was wearing a pair of white vintage jeans and a pure black t-shirt with a black hairpin on her head. Not only did she not look feminine, but she gave off an evil vibe. Needless to say, when someone glanced over, the youngster held the wine glass and lifted her lips into a smile. The curve at the corner of her lips pierced straight into the heart. Stay on campus? Even if she hadn't heard the entire conversation, Bo Jio caught onto the key point. In her current situation, it would be easier for her to conceal herself if she lived in the school. That was because the campus network there could be shared after a skillful connection. Chapter 9-10. With that in mind, the youngster lowered her lids and drank a glass of wine. She was prepared to find a time to have a good chat with a certain director. After all, she was still the one making the decisions on whether to stay on campus or not. Fortunately, this group of people was too eye-catching. All of them were good-looking. Jiang Zhua, who was sitting at the far end, noticed them immediately. It was obvious that Feng Yi and the others didn't inform them beforehand. When he saw the familiar figure sitting behind them, Jiang Zhua casually pulled out a bottle of wine from the ice bucket and strolled over to their card bag. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" This sentence was directed at Qin Mo. But he sat on Yao Yao's right. Shui Yao Yao, who had just relaxed, immediately tensed up. Even the wine glass in her hand paused for a moment. Fortunately, Jiang Zhua didn't look at her. It seemed like he was just here to greet Almighty Qin. Qin Mo glanced over. Team gathering. What he meant was that it was different from other times. There wasn't much preparation. Jiang Zhua chuckled lightly, the aura of a rich young master. "It seems like you guys won. The next match will be against Xiangnan, NH." Even though there wasn't much change in his voice, it was obvious that he was different in front of Jiang Zhua compared to others. The two of them were brothers who came from the same courtyard, so they chatted casually. Shui Yao Yao saw that Jiang Zhua didn't have any intention of leaving and her breathing was a little tight. Because of the limited sofa space in the card bag, they were so close that they could smell each other's breath. In addition, his empty hand was placed on her long legs, so intimate. Shui Yao Yao's back stiffened, instinctively avoiding his action. What was he doing? Jiang Zhua's gaze turned towards her, extremely dark, as though he was brewing something. Shui Yao Yao knew what he meant. He was reminding her that time was up. Because it was Thursday. They had agreed on the day they would go to bed. Shui Yao Yao tightened her grip on the wine bottle. That was the reason why she didn't want to come back. Wasn't it a little amusing? He didn't have any feelings for her, but he wouldn't let her off in this aspect. But he also said that he was doing this to her as a punishment. As for what the punishment was, it was obvious. He hated her. Even now, he still hated her family for ruining his original life. Just as he said, in his eyes, whether it was her or her mother, they flattered his father just for the Jiang family's money. In some aspects, Jiang Zhua wasn't wrong. His mother married Uncle Jiang because she liked him a little, but most of the reason was that the Shui family was inseparable from the Jiang family. As his mother said, Uncle Jiang could send his younger brother to a good middle school, which was very important to his mother. Hence, even though Jiang Zhua wasn't easy to get along with, her mother didn't say anything and tolerated everything. Shui Yao Yao thought it was better this way since it could lessen some of her guilt. But she saw him with another woman just now. She wanted to confirm something because she didn't want to ruin someone's relationship without knowing it. Chapter 9-11. Bo Jio was still thinking about the dormitory and didn't pay much attention to the interaction between Shui Yao Yao and Jiang Zhua. But when she heard Shui Yao Yao's words, she asked gently, "Do you need me to go with you? The nightclub isn't safe sometimes." "It's fine, I can go alone." Shui Yao Yao smiled, her heart softening as she watched the youngster. Even her eyes were brighter than before. Jiang Zhua's eyes dimmed when he saw this. He didn't say anything. He continued to drink as though he hadn't heard their conversation. He tilted his head back and drank the wine in his hand, turning his leg to let Shui Yao Yao out. After about a minute, he stood up and raised his glass towards Chin Mo. I have a friend over there, you guys can drink first. Chin Mo glanced at Jiang Zhuo. He was already aware of some things, but he didn't like to interfere in other people's relationships. Especially since he knew Jiang Zhuo well, he only acknowledged with a faint H and didn't say anything else. At this moment, Shui Yaoyao was standing at the corridor. She wasn't dressed like the other girls in the nightclub, she was dressed very conservatively. It was just that she, who had lost weight, was especially fair. Her eyes were also a lot bigger. When she tied her hair up, her neck would always look very white and slender from the back. It made people want to know what she looked like from the front. There was a man passing by, dressed rather maturely. When he saw Shui Yaoyao, his eyes lit up. Then he walked over and lowered his voice. His face was chiseled and tough. Alone? The nightclub wasn't well lit. Shui Yaoyao turned when she heard the voice. The man's gaze deepened. So it's you. Shui Yaoyao didn't recognize the person in front of her, her eyes filled with confusion. You are? I know Boss Feng. The man had a company under him. He was in the network integration business and wasn't unfamiliar with esports. Of course, it wasn't the photos that made him remember Shui Yaoyao. It was her personal story. Shui Yaoyao was just another selling point for a professional esports player's publicity. She was like most ordinary girls, but she had leaped into the limelight of a professional esports player. In addition, she used to be very mellow, and her current appearance was undoubtedly a very good story template. However, at that time, when the man looked at the information, he felt that if all the girls in this world were as hardworking as her, then the results of some things might be different. The man smiled. Originally, he had intended to play around, but now, there was a hint of sincerity. Alright, let's not talk about me. Why are you here alone? The nightclub is not a safe place. Shui Yaoyao wanted to say something. A familiar deep voice came from behind. Boss Ling, you're in a good mood. I didn't know you knew my friend. Shui Yaoyao didn't need to look to know who that voice belonged to. It was probably because she did not keep to the time agreement that the person's voice carried a trace of coldness, as if it was stained with a heavy layer of ice. Director Zhang's friend? The man raised his eyebrows and chuckled. It doesn't look like it. Jiang Zhuo had never been like this before. Even though his lips were curved, there wasn't a smile in his eyes. What doesn't seem right? Director Zhang's friends are all. The man paused before continuing. She doesn't seem to belong to that type. Jiang Zhuo glanced at Shui Yaoyao. Probably because of the distance, his voice became colder. Director Ling, don't you know that some people can't be judged by their appearance? This sentence obviously had another meaning. The man frowned, wanting to speak up for Shui Yaoyao. But Jiang Zhuo pulled her over, his left hand holding onto Shui Yaoyao's wrist. There wasn't a hint of awkwardness on his face. Instead, he had a warlord's child smile. It was devilish. I have some private matters to discuss with her. Please help yourself, Director Ling. Before the man could say anything, Jiang Zhuo had already dragged her to the corridor at the side. The nightclub's bodyguards automatically stood out, blocking the entrance. After all, this was Jiang Zhuo's place. There were some special places prepared for him. The corridor was paved with red carpet, and at the end was a luxurious private room. That private room was rarely visited, specially provided for Jiang Zhuo to rest. Hence, there weren't many people around, except for a few high-ranking officials and children who came to have fun. Even if they saw Jiang Zhuo dragging someone, they would think it was a beauty. The ambiguous expression on their faces clear. Hey, young Master Jiang seems to have changed his taste today. Who is this for young Master Jiang to bring her here personally? A drunk youngster placed his arm over a girl's shoulder, leaning over to see what Shui Yaoyao looked like. Jiang Zhuo blocked him, looking playful. What's so good about a girl? Go do what you have to do, I have something to do here. What can you do at this hour? The youngster laughed even more happily. Alright, I understand. I won't disturb young Master Jiang and this lady, have fun. Alright, get lost. Jiang Zhuo was always like this in front of others, his child aura mixed with the aura of a gangster. Shui Yaoyao heard his words and roughly knew what kind of person he thought she was. Hence, she didn't retort. Anyway, no one could see her from where she was standing. It was a day like today. Shui Yaoyao just hoped that no one would recognize her, as long as she didn't embarrass Supreme Alliance. Jiangzhou probably didn't want others to know that they were together, otherwise, he wouldn't have ignored her and said those words. Come to think of it, his attitude towards her had never changed. He probably hated her, but at that time he just felt that there was no need to be calculative with a girl like her, who was a toad trying to eat swan meat. After all, she hadn't shown herself in front of him yet. Later, when the conflict erupted, she understood his hatred. He had told her that the thing he was most unhappy about was that Uncle Jiang had forgotten about his mother. At that time, the two of them were keeping a secret, and he had always told her anything he wanted to say. He even said that he could only say all his unhappiness in front of a ball like her. No one would have expected that her mother would become the woman Uncle Jiang wanted to marry. To him, regardless of whether it was her or her mother, they were probably no different from the gold diggers outside. Ever since that day, the way he looked at her was as cold as ice, as though it could pierce through a person's bones, just like now. After entering the luxurious room, Jiangzhou exerted force with his wrist, pressing the person in front of him into the sofa. Then he bent down and lowered his body, his voice ringing in Shui Yaoyao's ears. I really underestimated your ability to recognize people. But now that young Master Fu isn't important to you, you're starting to change him? Shui Yaoyao clenched her fists. This has nothing to do with His Highness Jiao. Looking at Shui Yaoyao's expression, Jiang's gaze turned cold. You treasure him so much? Heh, what do you think he would think if he knew what you are like? Shui Yaoyao's gaze met Jiang's, and there was no room for resistance. I have always thought that this contract is between the two of us. When we were together, we agreed to keep it a secret. Otherwise, I wouldn't have agreed to the contract. Yes, everything you said is right. Jiang's sneered, his fingers pinching Shui Yaoyao's chin. He bit down on her lips, his voice cold. But don't forget who begged me to agree to this contract. Shui Yaoyao knew that she had no right to refute his words. If that young Master Fu knew that you have done so much for him, would he be touched, or would he be like me and feel that you are pestering him? Jiang's fingers slid down her chin, into her collar. It's a pity that no matter who you pester, you won't pester him to the end. The coldness from her collarbone made Shui Yaoyao shudder. Her fingers tightened naturally, her brows furrowed. Jiang's didn't like her expression. It was as though she was tolerating something and hadn't really accepted him. His gaze turned even colder. But you aren't even willing for me to touch you now? Shui Yaoyao knew that if she wasn't willing, Jiang's wouldn't take another step forward. Just like now, he had already stopped. Even though his breath still lingered on her lips and nose, at least his hand that was about to cover her had stopped. This gave Shui Yaoyao a chance to talk rationally. I just saw you with a very beautiful person. This was what she wanted to say this time. What was unbelievable was that Jiang's seemed to have recovered a little. His lips curved upwards, his beautiful eyes looking at her. It wasn't clear whether it was playful or sarcastic. Jealous. Only then did Shui Yaoyao realize that he had misunderstood something. She immediately explained, No, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, just like what we said in the contract, if you have someone you like, tell me and we'll end this relationship. Otherwise, you'll hurt a third person. Plus, if you have someone you like, you'll probably hate doing this with me, right? For some reason, his side profile suddenly turned cold. You don't have to remind me about such things. Just like what you said, if I have someone I like, I definitely won't want to touch you again. I will inform you when the time comes. Shui Yaoyao's voice faded, and she smiled as though a huge burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She looked as though she had heaved a sigh of relief. Jiang's didn't seem to have the slightest interest. He retracted his hand and lit a cigarette, holding it between his fingers. Aren't you a little too self-conscious? Chapter 9:12. How do you think I feel about you? Jiang's glanced over, the color in his eyes darkening. I just feel indignant, don't misunderstand your position. If it had been in the past, Shui Yaoyao would have been heartbroken. But now that she knew the truth, she said, I've never misunderstood anything. I'm just reminding you because if something happens, it won't be good for either of us. Similarly, I won't have any illusions about you anymore. I've said what I should have said that day. Actually, thinking about it, it's quite funny that we have such a contract, isn't it? I earned quite a bit from the competition this time. If you have any thoughts, we can use other methods to solve some problems. Jiangzhou laughed, reaching out to extinguish the cigarette in the ashtray, the coldness at the corner of his lips obvious. That's right, I forgot that you're already a small god in the esports world. But after gaining fame, you feel that your past is too unbearable and you want to get rid of it? Jiangzhou leaned over, his breath hitting the back of Shui Yaoyao's ears. The game has already begun, as for when it ends, it's up to me, not you. With that, Jiangzhou stood up, walking out of the room. The aura emanating from his back made some of the staff in the nightclub afraid to take a step forward. Anyone could tell that young Master Jiang wasn't in a good mood, which was why he came to the nightclub to drink. Now, it seemed even worse than before. He had clearly brought a girl in. How did he end up like this? Shui Yaoyao glanced at the door that had been slammed shut, the sound still echoing. She roughly knew what Jiangzhou was thinking. He had always been a leader. Of course, he wouldn't allow anyone to end what he wanted to do. It probably had to do with his pride. Shui Yaoyao stood up, walking out. When the nightclub staff's gaze landed on her collar, she seemed to realize something. She blushed, lowering her head to tidy her clothes before walking towards the Supreme Alliance card bag. She had thought that if he left just like that, the agreement would be cancelled. What Shui Yaoyao hadn't expected was that in less than 2 minutes, she received a message from Jiangzhou just as she walked down the corridor. The content was for her to greet the people from Supreme Alliance. Someone would pick her up and they would meet at the usual place. She had been going there every Thursday since they had agreed to meet at the old place. That was Jiangzhou's own house. Probably no one knew he had such a house. Some people said that he often kept beauties in there. However, she reckoned that if those people knew that she was also a member of the Fragrance of Heaven and Earth, they would definitely be surprised. After all, among the people he knew, her appearance was indeed very ordinary. Shui Yaoyao had always been self-aware. Especially in this aspect. Even more so. She's on Thursday. He just didn't know what day it was for the others. Even though he had promised her that he would only do it with her when they were together. But today's scene made Shui Yaoyao feel like she didn't understand Jiangzhou at all. The person she used to know was like her best memory. When it stopped at that moment, she would always mistake it for warmth. Chapter 9:13. Someone as warm as a brother would only exist when nothing had happened. When it happened, she also truly understood his thoughts and the gap between the two of them. Feelings couldn't be forced. She sincerely hoped that they could be clear that she wasn't someone who clung to anyone. Shui Yaoyao didn't reply to the message. Today was an important day for everyone. She didn't want to be absent from Supreme Alliance's victory celebration. She believed that he would find someone to replace her. But Supreme Alliance was irreplaceable to her. Moreover, Highness Jiu was so smart, it was probably because she didn't reply. Very quickly, the next day's WeChat came. Shui Yaoyao glanced at it and sent a few words over. Find someone else today. After the National League, I will abide by our agreement. Find someone else? When Jiangzhou saw the 3 words, his eyes turned extremely cold. What kind of person did she think he was? Or was it because she didn't care anymore and it had nothing to do with her who he was with? Jiangzhou sat in the back seat of the extended black car. The interior of such a luxurious car was very grand. Beside him was a cigarette lighter and a wine glass holder. He tightened his grip on the phone. That man from the Fu family was really very important to her. The driver could clearly see his young master's unhappy expression, but he didn't dare to say anything. He watched as the person threw the phone in his hand to the side and disappeared into the night. Not going there today, back to the courtyard. Yes, young master. Even though the driver was shocked, he didn't show it. But his young master had said that he was going to pick up second miss today. Now it seemed like they weren't on good terms again. Outside the car window, the night continued. The unique liveliness of a nightclub hadn't subsided at all. It was the reverberation music that could make people high. The DJ wore black headphones and played with one hand while the other led the rhythm. It was like a sleepless night that made people excited. But it was such a night that things happened easily. There were probably many benefits to being good-looking. For example, he didn't know how many waves of girls had come over to buy the youngster a drink. Chin Imo was even sent a huge fruit platter. Perhaps it was because Jiangzhou wasn't the one serving Chin Imo this time. He didn't go to the private room along the corridor. Instead, he sat at the two sides of the stage, which was why people thought he was just here to play. After all, Chin Imo was wearing his private clothes. He had shed the business suit and the team battle uniform. All that was left was his original color. He was noble with a hint of indifference. It was the kind of temperament that attracted girls. Even the curve of his chin made people want to stare at him again and again. At this time, Coco always sighed. They were both university students, but why was there such a huge difference between him and Captain? In fact, even if they were all esports almighties, only Coco had appeared more often. Hence, Coco was wearing a black mask and hugging a bottle of wine to get drunk. He was frustrated that he couldn't show off his beautiful face. Speaking of which, it was probably because of his cold aura that not many people got close to him. On the other hand, Bo Jio was surrounded by 3 to 4 girls, all of them blushing as they chatted with her. This was what Shui Yaoyao saw when she came back. Bo Jio smiled and said to the girls, "My friend is back, please give up your seat." Even if the girls had other thoughts, they could only leave since she had already said that. But before they could take a step, it happened. Not far away, a man with a thick gold chain and a handbag on his arm walked over aggressively. Behind him were 3 or 4 people who looked like underlings. He swept a glance at one of the girls and pulled her back. He raised his chin and glanced at the silver-haired youngster in front of him. "Do you know who she is? How can you drink her wine so casually?" Lin Feng was tired of looking at the girls and wanted to talk to Little Spade about brotherly matters. The so-called brotherly matters were probably to ask the gays what they were thinking. Why didn't they like soft girls? Why did they have to like guys who were as hard as them? He hadn't expected that before he could put on a serious expression, someone had come to ruin his plans. The naive Lin Feng's definition of a good thing was a little unusual. But that didn't affect his desire to beat them up. The man with the gold chain was still pretending to be cultured. "Look at your looks, you haven't been around much. How are you going to settle the score for flirting with someone's girlfriend? Shouldn't you talk about it?" Bo Jio swirled the wine glass, looking like a nocturnal prince. She laughed. "What do you want to talk about? I'm not an unreasonable person who dares to drink anyone's wine, right?" The man with the gold chain glanced over. Immediately, someone passed a bottle of wine over. It was white and had a high purity. "Since you like to drink so much, finish the whole bottle in front of me." The man with the gold chain sounded calm, his entire aura imposing. Usually, the students would have given in when they saw him like this. A bunch of people who came from nowhere were acting so high profile just because they were handsome. Weren't they asking for a beating? The golden chain man wanted to teach them a lesson and let them know how high the heavens were and how deep the earth was. But the man didn't expect the youngster to not show any signs of fear. Instead, she looked at him and lifted her lips. "What if I say I don't want to drink?" The gold-chained man's eyes darkened, and he looked very dangerous. Looks like some people just want to suffer before they realize how ridiculous their words are. With that, he glanced to his left and right. The two of them clenched their fists, rushing towards her with a murderous aura. But before they could even get close to the young man, their feet hit the ground, and they fell face first onto the ground. It was Chin Imo. He was still holding onto the wine glass, but his long legs were stretched out. The man with the gold chain was infuriated when he saw the situation. "Look, this bunch of people refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack," the man with the gold chain ordered. The people around him pounced towards the youngster like a swarm of bees. They were obviously relying on their numbers and familiarity with the place to get rid of someone. The man with the gold chain was still waiting for the youngster to beg for mercy. Just then, the youngster in front of him bent over and kicked beautifully. While she dodged the man's attack, she reached out and pulled him over forcefully. The youngster's movements were swift, so swift that the man with the gold chain couldn't retaliate in time. The others froze. After their legs were kicked by the youngster, they realized one thing. These people weren't to be trifled with. Bo Jio didn't mind. Since things were smashed during the fight, he would let the troublemaker pay for it. With that in mind, the youngster grabbed onto the gold-chained man who was about to retreat. Her actions were so cool that Lin Feng, who was seated at the side, wasn't of any use. She watched as the rest of the men were pushed down and there was only one left. Bo Jio exerted strength in her wrist. She grabbed onto his collar with one hand and lifted him up. "Do you still want me to finish the whole bottle? Do you know who I am? Do you know whose place this is?" The man with the gold chain was used to being arrogant and had no intention of holding back. "How dare you fight here? Where do you think this is? Where do you think you can come and go as you please? Look at my relationship with Jiang Zhua. How dare you challenge me?" That explained why the man with the gold chain was so fearless. It was because of their relationship. But if he was really close to young Master Jiang, how could he not know the Almighty? It was highly possible that the man with the gold chain was just a friend of young Master Jiang. He was flaunting his relationship with Jiang Zhua in front of the Almighty. Bo Jio treated it as a joke. The man with the gold chain didn't change his attitude towards them. Especially the person who had been sitting in the innermost corner, he lifted the corners of his lips as though he was mocking him. The man with the gold chain couldn't tolerate it. When he saw the waiters and bodyguards, even the manager was alerted and ran over. Instantly, he gained confidence. In reality, she had tried her best to reduce the area of influence during the fight. However, the big golden chain did not seem to think that it was time to reduce the area of influence. Instead, his words made many people look in his direction. After the manager heard the news, he hurriedly ran to the card box. The gold chain man pulled him over. "Manager Lee, look. These young people like to cause trouble. People like them should be chased out. It's good that you're here to teach them a lesson." After saying that, the golden-chained man glanced at the group of people again. It was as if he was saying, "Did you see that? If I want you to leave, it's just a matter of saying a few words." Regardless of whether it was Bo Jio or Shui Yaoyao, they could all read the meaning behind his gaze. "Actually, it doesn't matter if Manager Lee doesn't come. I can handle these people myself." Intentionally or unintentionally, the man flaunted his connections. "But I'm really thankful that you came all the way here just for me." However, the gold-chained man didn't expect Manager Lee to walk past him and ask Qin Mo, "Young Master Qin, do you need me to change your seat? Or what do you want to do?" Before Boss Jiang left, he instructed us to take good care of your card box. "I just left for a short while. I didn't expect this to happen." "Young Master Qin?" The moment Manager Lee said that, the golden chain man realized that he had done something stupid. He had never expected that young Master Qin would be sitting there. Wasn't he usually in a private room? Why was he so unlucky today? He had bumped into him sitting outside. Moreover, when he thought about what he had done and said to them, the golden-chained man's face turned red and white. It was embarrassing enough that he had mistakenly thought that Manager Lee had come specially for him. Now that he thought about it, he had even flaunted his relationship with young Master Jiang in front of young Master Qin. At this moment, the golden-chained man wanted to find a hole to hide in. While his heart was pounding, there was also an indescribable sense of awkwardness. The girls were still standing at the side. When they heard Manager Lee call Qin Mo, young Master Qin, they realized something and looked over with a different gaze. Qin Mo rarely came to this kind of place. Even if he did, he would order a private room. It was rare for him to sit outside like this. Some of them had just delivered fruit platters here, and many rich people had said that they had their eyes on someone in this group. Now, it seemed that none of them were people that they could get close to. As for Qin Mo, he lifted his lids and glanced at the man in the gold chain. His voice was calm and there was an indescribable indifference in it. "There is one thing you are mistaken about. In the future, look after your girlfriend well. Don't give her alcohol so casually. Not everyone will drink the alcohol she gives. If you can't look after your own woman well, you will vent your anger on others who are more outstanding than you. Boss Hong, do you think you are a man? Boss Hong was a golden-chained man. His words were a slap in the face. Boss Hong was shocked that this young Master Qi knew him. Apart from the shock, he thought about why everyone said that young Master Qin wasn't someone to be trifled with. That one sentence had shaped his behavior for the day. It sounded a little perverted. Moreover, this matter was caused by this little girlfriend of his who was not well behaved. Qin Nemo was just short of saying that it was his girlfriend's problem and it had nothing to do with others. Boss Hong turned his head and saw that many people were looking at him. He had really lost all his face. This was a place he frequented, which was why he knew Jiang Zhua. In some aspects, there was no distinction between the two sides. But because of this, when the young master of the Qin family said that not only had he been cuckolded, but he was also narrow-minded and narrow-minded. If *ck were all cultured people like that? It didn't sound like much, but when he thought about it, it was more lethal than dealing with him directly. This young Master Qin was really too. Boss Hong wasn't well educated and couldn't find the right words to describe him. Bo Jiao shook her head regretfully. In terms of shamelessness, she really couldn't compare to the Almighty. When he saw the youngster shaking her head, Qin Nemo arched a brow. His voice was calm. Come over. It was obvious who he was talking to. Boss Hong wouldn't foolishly stay there to be a target. After apologizing, he quickly left, mainly because he was afraid that young Master Qin would say something else. Originally, he didn't want to do anything, he just wanted to scare them, but who knew that he would be the one being scared? Chapter 9:14. Bo Jiao arched a brow. She walked over. Qin Nemo didn't hold back at all. He sat there and pulled her over. His thin lips were extremely close to her nose, just a few tenths of an inch away. Their posture instantly attracted a group of people's attention. Especially when the youngster leaned forward, the sharp edges of his face were covered with tiny fur. It was clean and fair, carrying an indescribable handsomeness. The two of them were in such a position, it was too much like the prelude to a kiss. It's too easy to attract attention. Bo Jiao. She really didn't know what to say. After all, the Almighty was the best at attracting attention. The two of them were already handsome. Now, they were displayed in such a suggestive manner in front of everyone. Some of the beauties who had wanted to buy the youngster a drink stopped in their tracks. There were also some who had hoped for the appearance of the legendary young Master Qin. Now that he had finally appeared, they all froze on the spot with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. For a moment, everyone was looking at the card holder in the center. Their mouths were wide open, filled with indescribable shock. They really didn't think that the two of them would have that kind of relationship. After all, both of them were very handsome. The aura they exuded was rare as well. If these two people were indeed abnormal in that aspect, it was really a waste of heavenly gifts. Could it be that they were thinking too much? Perhaps the two of them were just brothers, but which good brother would use such a posture to talk? The girls seemed to hear the sound of their hearts breaking. There were some who didn't give up. They held onto their wine bottles and bit their lips, continuing to look around. Qin Mo exerted force, bringing the youngster's face closer to him. I don't like to fight. It's tiring to deal with another Boss Hong. Qin Mo's voice was calm. It didn't seem like there was any problem at all. But who would believe his words? Even if there were 10 more Boss Hong, they would still have to kneel in front of their captain. The captain had always been expressionless when it came to dealing with people. Just those few words just now had already revealed this characteristic of his. Now, he actually said it was tiring to deal with him. Such an excuse. What exactly was he trying to do? Just when the Supreme Alliance members were feeling puzzled, Qin Mo used force and pressed the youngster down beside him. Sit here, in case your face attracts more nobodies. Bo Jiao. That seat was really in the innermost area. She was almost in the same group as Coco. There was no exposure at all. But it didn't matter where she sat. The only difference was that the Almighty's legs were tightly pressed against hers. She didn't know if it was intentional or not. Seeing the youngster sit beside Qin Mo, the onlookers gave up completely. It wasn't that they were thinking too much, it was the truth. It was no wonder that no matter how beautiful the girl was, the young man didn't drink at all. Moreover, young Master Qin had always been cold and indifferent to everyone. Once a woman clung to him and didn't give up, that woman would be rejected the next day. It was the same for all of them. In the past, they always thought it was because of young Master Qin's personality, but now it seemed like it was because young Master Qin liked boys. Such a thing was definitely explosive, but no one dared to expose it. But someone like young Master Qin was gay. It wasn't just sad, some people's dreams of being rich were shattered. There were many people who had woken up from their dreams, including the girls who wanted to continue treating Bojio. After all, the youngster seemed like the one being kept. The toasts lessened instantly. Finally, there weren't as many people using the excuse of toasting to look at Bojio. But at this moment, no one noticed. Every time Bojio moved, Qin Mo would move closer. On the third time, the Almighty tilted his head, his voice calm. "Why are you so restless? Do you want to sit on my lap?" Bojio. The Almighty sounded as though she was the one taking advantage of him. Mainly, the Almighty hadn't spoken loudly, but it was clear enough for the surrounding people to hear. Everyone quietened down, lifting their heads to drink silently. Their gazes drifted over, especially Lin Feng. These two really didn't know how to restrain themselves, especially little Spade. Bojio didn't have to guess. Once she saw Lin Feng's gaze, she knew he had misunderstood something. After all, she was the aggressor in everyone's eyes. If she took the initiative, it wouldn't be wrong. But the Almighty's tricks. Bojio glanced up at Qin Mo. It was really shameless. Qin Mo allowed the youngster to size him up. There wasn't any hint of discomfort on his face. He was still indifferent and noble. The more he looked, the more she took the initiative. In the end, Bojio gave up. The Almighty was so handsome. In terms of looks, he was indeed able to take the initiative, regardless of gender. So be it if his long legs were pressed against hers, it wasn't as though they hadn't done more intimate positions before. She could touch his thighs and make the crime of taking advantage of him a reality. Since she was already the one taking advantage, it would be a waste not to touch him. After thinking it through, the youngster's expression became more mischievous. She placed her left arm on the sofa behind her, her right hand naturally placed on his long and slender leg. Speaking of which, it did seem like a domineering CEO teasing his secretary. It wasn't bad for her. Especially when her hand was placed on the Almighty's thigh, she could clearly feel his body freeze for a moment. Bojio had always been more than happy to be able to influence his actions. She still remembered the time when she had first met the Almighty. She had only needed to blow into his ear and he would go berserk, wanting to stuff her into a bucket like trash. It was rare to see an Almighty like this. Anyone could tell that the youngster was a hedonistic son, the smile on her face obvious. Who knew what she was up to? The moment she placed her hand on his thigh, Qin Mo's hand paused. When he saw that she had no intention of moving her hand away, his gaze deepened. There wasn't any change in the contours of his face, it was still chiseled. However, his eyes seemed to be penetrated by something, they were extremely deep. A certain someone was undoubtedly plucking the hair off a tiger's head, but she didn't seem to be aware of it. She smiled at him. Brother Mo's tofu isn't bad. The youngster's hand slid down the side of his thigh. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. He put down the wine glass in his hand, leaned closer to the person, and held her wrist with his other hand. Bojio assumed that the Almighty wanted her to move her hand away. Unexpectedly, he lowered his voice, his breath landing beside her ear. He tilted his handsome face, his pale lips pressing against the hair behind her ear. The minty tobacco scent was extremely obvious. "You aren't touching the right place. Go further down, a little towards the center. A little further down and in the middle." Bojio lowered her eyes. She glanced at the man who was about to lift his head due to her actions. She was extremely familiar with the feeling of her blood slowly swelling up. That thing had tormented her for an entire night. Most importantly, she had only taken a glance at it, but it seemed to have grown a little bigger. Bojio couldn't help wanting to retreat, but the Almighty held onto her wrist. When she glanced up, she saw his eyes that were as deep as the night sea and that face that was incomparably elegant no matter where she looked at it. Logically speaking, There would definitely be people noticing them when they were so close to each other. Indeed, there would be people noticing, but in a noisy nightclub, it wasn't strange for them to be so close to each other. Moreover, Lin Feng was still thinking about how to win against Yunhu, hence, he used all his backup plans. He got Coco to stare at Yunhu's spot and give him hints. Uncle Ian had drunk quite a lot and was smoking. Shui Yaoyao wasn't paying attention. She swiped open her phone screen and waited for it to dim. Therefore, no one noticed the movements of these two people. In addition, the two of them were indeed sitting very close to each other. No matter how intimate they were, it wouldn't make people feel anything. On the contrary, just looking at the two of them sitting together and talking with their faces close to each other's ears was too pleasing to the eye. The tips of her ears turned red, her palms burning hot, especially when he held onto her hand and moved it downwards. It didn't feel like she was teasing him. Instead, it felt like she was being teased. Why? You were touching me with all your might just now, but now you don't dare to? Qin Mo's voice was a little hoarse as though he was warning her. How are you going to take responsibility if you're done touching me? Bo Jio knew that if this continued, she would be the one in danger. Fortunately, this wasn't the same as in the car or on the bed. She smiled faintly and stood up. I'm going to get a plate of dried fruits. You guys can continue. Bo Jio had always been skilled. If she wasn't trapped, it wouldn't be difficult for her to escape from the Almighty's strong aura. The Supreme Alliance members didn't pay attention to this side. They were all immersed in the game of dice rolling. When Lin Feng heard that she was going to get a plate of dried fruits, he glanced up and said, "Another bucket of ice." All right. Bo Jio didn't stay any longer. She had wanted to escape for a while. Qin Mo watched as the figure walked further and further away. He raised his eyebrows and frowned heavily. He had finished the wine in his hand, but he couldn't get up. He could only wait for the heat to dissipate. The feeling of that person's fingers still lingered on his long legs. It was too sweet. Qin Mo's eyes darkened. He reached out and tugged his collar open, pressing the loose strands of hair to the back of his head. In this state, he was even more alluring and seductive than usual. Especially when he moved, it was as though he was a blooming red spider lily, elegant with an indescribable beauty, attracting the attention of everyone in the nightclub. Especially the girls, they couldn't help but glance over. But when they thought about the interaction between young Master Qin and the youngster, they could only sigh internally. Why did handsome men end up with other men? Previously, they would still approach him without fear of death, but now that they saw him like this, they really didn't have any thoughts of being extraordinary anymore. Even if that person was exuding a charm that made people want to look at him again and again, they couldn't go any further. It was such a pity that they couldn't touch him. Just as the beauties were feeling disappointed, Bo Jio had already gotten the dried fruit platter. But when she brushed past a girl, she suddenly stopped. It wasn't for any other reason, it was because the girl didn't know what was going on, but her legs went soft and she almost fell. Bo Jio went over to support her instinctively. But when she touched the girl's arm, her heart froze. Why was she so skinny? That was Bo Jio's first reaction. But before she could react, her fingers were trembling. The girl seemed to be enduring something, her fingers trembling slightly. Bo Jio thought something was wrong with her. She tilted her head and asked, "Are you feeling unwell?" Washroom. The girl finally raised her head. Her looks were not bad. It was probably because her makeup was messed up that she looked a little like a ghost. Bo Jio observed her expression. The washroom isn't in this direction. Washroom, I need to go to the washroom. As the girl spoke, she seemed to be inhaling and exhaling. Her expression became very indescribable. Even her face was much paler than before, as if a serious illness was about to act up. But Bo Jio knew it wasn't a serious illness. It was a state that happened when a drug addict wanted to take drugs. But she never expected someone so young to be involved in drugs on the mainland. After all, the girl seemed to be around her age and was just a high school student. Bo Jio frowned, reaching out to pull the girl's wrist over, pulling the sleeves of the long dress she was wearing. Sure enough, in the armpit, there were still remnants of the tiny needle and the greenish skin. This proved that she wasn't a newbie. Bo Jio's eyes widened. This was the first time there was a different color in them. She was well aware of the law and order in the mainland. Some places were extremely strict with drugs, especially in Jiang City. Besides, based on Jiang's personality, even if he opened a nightclub, he wouldn't allow his subordinates to touch such things. After all, he was a military officer. Coupled with his background and his relationship with the Almighty, all of these made this nightclub cleaner than any other nightclub in the city. If there was anything that was not clean, it would be the interactions between the officials. But those had nothing to do with drugs. More importantly, this girl didn't seem like someone who would be addicted to drugs. After all, no matter from the way she dressed, she belonged to the type of obedient girl. Chapter 9:15. Bo Jio could feel the grip on her wrist getting harder and harder to control. The girl seemed to be enraged, shouting at her darkly, "Wei, where's the washroom? Give it to me, I know it's there, give it to me." Usually, when a drug addict acted up, they would be extremely strong. They would be like a lunatic that no one could control. This girl wasn't an exception. Since she couldn't find the answer she was looking for, she pushed Bo Jio into a pile of alcohol. It was called a pile of alcohol because there was a triangular shape made of alcohol bottles. It was originally a luxurious display. It was easy to imagine how big of a commotion would be caused by such a collision. Most of the staff in the nightclub looked over. Fortunately, Bo Jio's reflexes were fast. When the bottle fell, she wasn't pushed down. Otherwise, her right hand would have been cut by the broken bottle. Almost immediately, the nearest nightclub staff ran over. Bo Jio was stopped by them. Hence, she missed the opportunity to follow the girl. "Sir." The manager wanted to say something, but when he saw the youngster beside Qin Mo, his attitude changed instantly. "Young Master Jio, why are you here? Are you hurt anywhere?" Bo Jio shook her head, her dark eyes watching the direction the girl had left with a glint in her eyes. The nightclub manager didn't know what the youngster was thinking about. He turned to the staff. "Clean up the place and check the surveillance cameras. What exactly happened?" "Yes." The nightclub manager was smart. He knew the youngster wouldn't knock into a pile of alcohol for no reason. Moreover, she had knocked into it with her back. Bo Jio knew that Jiang's had hired a good person. She walked over with a devilish smile. "I'm sorry for the trouble, but there is indeed something. Since young Master Jiang is Brother Mo's friend, I'll remind you that someone has other business here. Manager Li, it's time for you to investigate." In a nightclub, the other business was prostitution, pimping, and the most profitable drug. If it was the former, it could be dealt with slowly. But if it was the latter, young Master Jiang's identity was special. If someone found out that there was such a thing in his club, the entire Jiang family would be implicated. Manager Li's expression changed, but he had to suppress it in front of the youngster. "What other business does young Master Jio mean?" Bo Jio stuffed a hand into her pocket and took a step forward. She opened her lips slightly, her voice calm, but it was as though a huge chunk of gold had drilled into Manager Li's heart. Fin. With just one word, Manager Li could no longer maintain his composure. How did young Master Jio know about this? Manager Li was very anxious when he said this. Bo Jio could tell and briefly explained the process. Manager Li really didn't know what to do. Bo Jio suggested, "Let's head to the surveillance room and check the footage of this girl. We have to report this to the police. If we don't, when they find out, your shop will become a den and you won't be able to clear your name. Also, Manager Li, how many bathrooms do we have here?" "Bathroom?" Manager Li didn't understand. "Young Master Jio, why are you asking this question?" Chapter 9:16. Manager Li wanted to know how she knew the washroom wasn't within their surveillance. Why did he feel as though young Master Jio knew the structure of the nightclub better than him? "We don't have much time, get someone to call the police, we'll talk as we walk." Bo Jio walked towards the corridor at the side. Manager Li. Who exactly was the manager of this nightclub? Manager Li didn't have any experience in dealing with such matters since it was the Jiang family's business and no one dared to cause trouble here. Now that something like this had happened, it was extremely vexing. Manager Li organized his thoughts. There are many washrooms and some private rooms have their own washrooms. If you include those, there should be more than 100 of them? Public washrooms, Bo Gio replied faintly. It isn't easy to find a buyer for such transactions in a high-class private room. Manager Lee. Since you know so much, I really thought you were the drug dealer, young Master Gio. Public washrooms. Bo Gio turned to the side, opening up a path. She repeated, indicating for Manager Lee to lead the way. Nightclubs usually didn't have high floors in order to maintain their high-class decorations. The best ones were 2 floors that looked like a palace, standing by the river with bright lights, looking like a place for the upper class. This was the main reason why the Jiang family didn't need to rely on other means to earn money. Such a nightclub wouldn't lack customers and the sales of red wine would be shocking. There were 2 floors and a total of 4 public washrooms. There were 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. Every single one of them was very clean. Even some of the toilets were made of ancient wood. There were also some large wine boxes, all of which were placed inside. There was a lemon-scented air freshener in the air. It was very pleasant. Strangely, this was the only public washroom with such a smell. Manager Lee followed the youngster around but couldn't see anything. Until Bo Gio said, "Let's go to the one we saw just now." Manager Lee opened his mouth. "Young Master Gio, do you think we should wait for the police?" "There isn't a need." Bo Gio glanced at him. "Trust me, the drugs are in that washroom. The thick lemon-like smell is probably used to deal with sudden police raids. Unless it's a good police dog, it would be hard to detect other smells beneath the lemon-like smell." Manager Lee. "So how did you find out about something that even the police couldn't find out?" Bo Gio didn't look at Manager Lee's suspicious gaze. She smiled faintly and stepped into the bathroom. Without a moment's hesitation, he directly walked into each of the small partitions. What she saw was basically a seat with a sink in the back. When she lowered her eyes, her silver hair fell down and covered her expression, making her look especially handsome. Perhaps it had something to do with the youngster's movements. He casually stepped on the sink with one of his long legs and knocked on the sink lid with one hand. As his thin lips curled up, he directly lifted the sink lid. The entire process was as manly as flowing water. Manager Lee was dumbfounded by the sight. His disassembly skills were almost on par with professional toilets. Bo Gio pried them open because she wanted to see if there was anything inside. But it would take too much time for her to do it alone. The young man straightened his back and said, "Manager Lee, get your men to remove all the toilet and sink lids in this washroom. It'll be faster this way." Manager Lee really didn't know how to describe his current feelings. But having someone at the side to handle it was better than having no one since the police hadn't arrived yet. He ordered 4 to 5 people to enter the washroom. Bo Gio glanced at the corridor outside. "Manager Lee, can I trouble you to hang a cleaning sign outside the washroom?" They were here to find clues and arrest someone. If they didn't close the door after creating such a huge commotion, they would be in trouble in the end. Manager Lee sincerely felt that young Master Gio's face didn't change at all when she commanded him. She was even better than their young Master Jiang. At this moment, it wasn't the time to be concerned about such things. Even though he wasn't sure how capable he was. But the youngster didn't seem like a clueless person. But thinking about it, it was strange. It wasn't as if Manager Lee didn't know the youngster in the past. Using the word prodigal to describe him was a compliment. But now, the youngster standing in front of him seemed to have been reborn. His action of kicking open the washroom door was swift. Moreover, when the youngster gave orders, his aura was irresistible. "Go and hang a sign." A smart person like Manager Lee would never judge someone based on their past impressions. Hence, after Bo Gio finished speaking, he immediately got his men to do it. He wanted to see if the youngster could find anything. The washroom's decor wasn't as luxurious and wasn't as small as other nightclubs. There were about 20 seats. The 4 of them lifted the cover of the sink, but they weren't as fast as the youngster. Manager Lee watched from the side, feeling conflicted. In the end, the youngster lowered his lids. His handsome face seemed to be smiling. He reached out with his other hand and gestured towards him. He didn't even turn his head, indicating for him to go over. As the person in charge of the biggest nightclub in Jiang City, Manager Lee, who was known as Boss Lee, had never done such a crude thing before. But after understanding the youngster's intentions, he couldn't not go over. There might be something. Helplessly, Manager Lee pulled out a handkerchief from the front pocket of his suit. He covered his nose and walked over. Bo-jio turned and saw Manager Lee's expression. Fortunately, she hadn't waited for the police. If they had come, the Almighty would have been the one investigating the case. If the Almighty had come to check the washroom, it would have been torturous given his misophobia. Hence, as the owner, she was too considerate. She had helped her pet solve the problem at the beginning. Manager Lee didn't understand why the youngster was smiling. He glanced down and frowned. What is this? A black plastic bag? Bo-jio arched a brow. Of course it's what we are looking for. Manager Lee, aren't you going to take it out? Take it from here? Manager Lee's gaze was filled with rejection. Bo-jio laughed. It's just a sink, it isn't dirty. Why, Manager Lee, do you intend to let a customer like me take it? Do you still remember that you are a customer? People who didn't know better would think that this nightclub was owned by your family. You even know the way to the sink. Manager Lee screamed in his heart. He wanted to chop his feet. How could he know that the previous time Bo-jio had been here, she had even climbed through the ceiling? Manager Lee had no choice since it wasn't a good thing for others to know. The fewer people who knew about it, the better it would be for their young Master Jiang. He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes, scooping the bag out of the sink. He wanted to rush out and wash his hands. Bo-jio smiled faintly as she tore the black plastic bag open. 5 packets of white powdery substance fell out of the bag. Manager Lee froze on the spot. It was really drugs. And there was quite a lot of it. How could this be? The people who came here to play had their bags checked. If there was something like this, it would definitely be detained. It was one thing to hear the youngster talk about it, but it was another thing to see it. After all, Manager Lee was against drugs. He knew how scary it was. While Manager Lee was still lost in his thoughts, Bo-jio squatted down and picked up one of the packets. She weighed it and caressed it with her fingers. Her eyes dimmed. It's from the Golden Triangle. Manager Lee felt that the youngster's reaction wasn't the reaction a high school student should have after seeing drugs. But from the way she was searching, it didn't seem like something a high school student would know. Most importantly, how did young Master Jio know that these are from the Golden Triangle? If he didn't know young Master Jio's character, Manager Lee would have suspected that he had placed the things in the black plastic bag. But if he thought about it, young Master Jio probably liked to flaunt his wealth and chase after men. Even now, some images still flashed through his mind. But that didn't include him now. Bo-jio retracted her hand and straightened her body. This is good stuff. The purity is high, the particles are fine, and the workmanship is exquisite. Who would dare to do this here? It must be from overseas. Bo-jio's last few words were too professional. Manager Lee's eyes lit up. He realized that this wasn't an ordinary drug case. Hand the things over to the police and explain the situation in detail. Bo-jio paused. She glanced over, her eyes glimmering. Oh right, I remember that we have to do a full check before entering. Ordinary things aren't allowed in, right? Manager Lee nodded. That was why he was confused. What exactly was going on? Was there a problem with the security? Just as he was thinking about it, the youngster asked again. The young man asked again, who's in charge of cleaning the bathroom? You have to ask the Human Resources Department. As a manager, he didn't know. Bo-jio smiled. If it's convenient, give me a list. All right. Manager Lee's mind wasn't on this anymore. When his phone lit up, he seemed to have regained his confidence. The police are here, I'll get them over now. Don't. Bo-jio reached out to stop him, a faint smile on her face. Let them go to your office. Some things aren't suitable to cause such a huge commotion. If we alert the enemy, we won't even be able to have a surprise. Surprise? Now, Manager Lee only felt terrified. Who on earth placed these things in the sink of the toilet bowl without anyone noticing? And it wasn't just one, there were 2 black plastic bags. That was a total of 10 packets. 10 packets? How many people would be addicted? The scariest thing was, he didn't know how many people had bought a portion of it before they discovered it. Manager Li rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Why was Jiang City so unstable during this period of time? What should we do, young Master Jiu? We have to tell the police about this sooner or later. Bo Jiu's eyes dimmed. We can tell them, but don't let them come to this toilet. Just treat it as a routine check. I'll inform Brother Mo later and he'll settle the rest. It would be best if young Master Qin could help us. Manager Li heaved a sigh of relief. I still have to inform Boss Jiang about this. We can't hide such a huge problem from him. Bo Jiu wouldn't interfere. Up to you, it's better if others don't know. I understand, young Master Jiu. It won't be a good influence. Bo Jiu knew that it wasn't just a bad influence. There was a high possibility that someone had planted them here. The drug business was a profitable business. Many people were unscrupulous in order to earn this kind of money. Sometimes, the people who dealt with these things in the middle were the most inconspicuous ordinary people. They wouldn't even think about what was in the black plastic bags. In the past, Bo Jiu had been to a small town near the Golden Triangle in Yun City. There were many anti-narcotics policemen from the past. Countless anti-narcotics policemen died there in a year. They knew that it was the entrance to China. Once it was opened, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hence, they didn't hesitate to risk their lives. It was all for the sake of allowing the people living here to be happy and live a blessed life. It was a pity that some people didn't have this awareness, especially in that kind of border area. No one could have imagined that the largest drug trading market at that time, and the way to transport drugs from overseas to within the country, was a vegetable market in that small town. On one side, they were honest vegetable sellers. On the other, they were transporters who transported drugs to various parts of the continent. They knew what they were doing, but in their hearts, it was fine as long as they didn't take the drugs. It was mainly because selling drugs was more profitable than doing anything else. Hence, these vegetable sellers became the perfect middleman for the drug traffickers. At that time, the police couldn't find any clues because no one would have thought that the ordinary vegetable seller was a drug transporter. What was more frightening was that the entire market was the same. Once a person's worldview was formed, it was really hard to change. We humans are often the ones who kill ourselves. The people in the market were like this. When the police went to investigate, they even felt that the police were interfering with their business. It wasn't like the narcotics officers had never encountered such a situation before. There were also some celebrities who took drugs. There would always be a group of people who would say, "Isn't it just taking drugs? We didn't harm anyone. Why are you pestering our dada?" I really feel wronged for our dada. If this was enough to make him feel aggrieved, what about the anti-narcotics police who sacrificed their lives at the border to protect everyone? Bo Jiu felt that some people weren't worth protecting. So she was different from the Almighty. Chapter 9:17. Even though they were doing the right thing, they weren't understood. On the other hand, the wrongdoers were easily forgiven. That was human nature. Bo Jiu had always known this, because some people would easily forgive someone for someone else. The reason was simple: they weren't the ones who suffered the most. Perhaps that was the most heart-chilling part. The person they were protecting was the source of everything. Bo Jiu stood up. Without another word, she headed in the direction she had come from. After Manager Li kept the drugs, the first thing he did was to call Jiang's. Jiang's car hadn't reached home yet. After hearing the entire story, his eyes dimmed. "Turn around and head back to Yisei." "Yes, young master." The driver didn't understand what had happened, but his young master's expression was worse than before. He started to feel uneasy. Jiang's instructed Manager Li from afar. "Is young Master Qin still in the shop?" "Yes," Manager Li replied immediately. "Boss Jiang, don't worry, young Master Jiu has already informed young Master Qin." Jiang's frowned. "Young Master Jiu?" "That's right, we have to thank young Master Jiu. I never expected him to be so knowledgeable. If he hadn't noticed the abnormality of the person who bumped into him, we wouldn't have realized that there was such a business in the shop." What's more unbelievable is that he managed to find the drugs from the washroom in just 5 minutes. Young Master Jiang, you can't judge a person based on their past. They changed too quickly, way too quickly. Manager Li wanted Jiang Zhuo to understand the entire situation. Mainly, he wanted to explain why young Master Jiao knew about the drugs. It was because young Master Jiao had been the one who had discovered the drugs and not him. Alright, young Master Jiao was the one who suggested calling the police. He said it would be good for our shop. Jiang Zhuo's fingers stilled. He hadn't expected that the person who would solve the problem for his shop would be the young master of the Fu family. The night continued to fall. Qin Mo glanced down at the time on his phone. Wasn't a certain someone taking too long to get a dried fruit plate? At this thought, Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. Then he stood up, the warmth in his eyes no longer visible. Captain, where are you going? Lin Feng was obviously a little drunk. Qin Mo glanced at his blushing face before turning to look at Yun Hu was still pouring wine for Lin Feng. He understood what was going on and replied calmly, "Washroom. Why are all of you going to the bathroom?" Lin Feng lowered his head and downed another glass of wine. Qin Mo basically didn't interfere with the relationships between team members, be it male or female. What he was thinking was, what did that guy go to do? With a certain someone's skills, even if something had happened, it wouldn't have taken so long. A whole 15 minutes. Could it be that it was the same as last time? He was on the run again? Qin Mo's left hand that was hanging by his side tightened. The curve of his chin was a little cold, so much so that there was an indescribable hostility in his back view. There were always all kinds of people in a nightclub, especially in the direction of the corridor. There was also a boy who seemed to be drunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to walk in front of Qin Mo. That person probably didn't have a normal sexual orientation. When he saw Qin Mo walking over, he couldn't move his eyes away. It was as though he wanted to get closer to Qin Mo. After all, men were usually more open than women. His intention to ask Qin Mo to sleep was obvious. But the youngster just lowered his voice and called out, "Handsome." Qin Mo opened his thin lips and said, "Scram." He respected everyone's sexual orientation. But it didn't mean that he respected the debauchery of this circle. He was instinctively disgusted by such shameless people. It was Qin Mo's fault for looking like a man and a woman. The boy didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward and teased even more. "If you don't try, how do you know you won't like it?" Qin Mo swept his gaze over. The boy thought that he had a chance. His hand was about to touch Qin Mo's chest. In the next second, he was kicked to the ground. Qin Mo didn't hold back in this kick. The boy held his knee and rolled back and forth in pain. Qin Mo didn't have any intention of stopping. When he looked up and saw the youngster who appeared at the corner, he stopped in his tracks. Both of them had never expected to meet in the middle of the corridor. Bo Jiao watched the scene. She was almost certain that the Almighty was born straight. But why was he so insistent on making him straight? But the original owner of this body must have pursued the Almighty in the same way. It was a miracle that he was able to live healthily until now. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket and walked towards her under the boy's gaze. The boy bit his lips. "So you aren't a straight man. You already have a partner. Why are you acting so serious? Hey, ask your friend if he is willing to do it as a threesome. I don't have any objections." Bo Jiao found his words hilarious. Where did he get his confidence from? He thought that if he didn't have any objections, others would agree to his ridiculous suggestion. As expected, no matter where you were, there would always be people with a broken worldview. Bo Jiao and Qin Mo had the same attitude towards such people. They would either ignore them or beat them up. It was obvious that they had more important matters to attend to today. Hence, Bo Jiao didn't even glance at the boy. She turned to Qin Mo, "Brother Mo, there's a problem with darkness." Qin Mo saw the seriousness in the youngster's eyes and immediately realized it was a huge problem. "Let's talk while we walk." "All right, but this isn't the direction. We have to go to Manager Li's office." Bo Jiao took a step forward. Qin Mo was on her left, and the two of them disappeared around the corner. The boy on the ground felt as though he had been slapped in the face. It was a harsh slap. Time trickled by slowly. After they met up, Bo Jio told Chin Mo everything that had happened. After she was done, she couldn't help but ask, "Did you want to beat me up when I chased you like this in the past?" Unexpectedly, Chin Mo thought about it seriously. "You should be glad that you haven't been as close to me as he is now." Which meant, it was within your tolerance range. Chin Mo was thinking about his attitude back then. "But I didn't want to bother." Bo Jio arched a brow. "That's not much better. Indeed, I didn't like you at the start." Chin Mo glanced at her. "Until you changed your method to attract my attention. You refused to add me as a friend in the game. It wasn't a bad method to advance by taking a step back." Bo Jio opened her mouth. She wanted to say that the Almighty had misunderstood. At that time, she had been purely rejecting him. But before she could speak, Chin Mo spoke again, his gaze deep. Chin Mo opened his mouth again, his gaze deep. "Or did I misunderstand? Did you want to reject me from the start? That's weird. You were insisting on wanting me the day before, and the next day, you didn't even seem to recognize me. Do you think that's normal?" It wasn't normal. Hence, Bo Jio could only swallow her words. She admitted his words. "I was indeed taking a step back to advance." Chin Mo chuckled at the youngster's depressed expression. "Do you like me that much? Do you like me so much that you would resort to such underhanded methods?" "Yes. What else could she do? Say no? Then the Almighty would notice something amiss and discover her biggest secret?" She was starting to suspect that the Almighty had said it on purpose. "Since you like me so much," Chin Mo paused, looking at the youngster, "why didn't you agree to be with me?" Bo Jio paused. Every single one of his questions was a trap. The Almighty was the only one who could do such a thing. Bo Jio had to find an excuse. "I'm still a boy, I have to be careful." Chin Mo watched the youngster, his gaze deepening. "Then I'll wait for you to regain your true identity." Bo Jio didn't know how to respond. She hoped that the Almighty would treat her the same way he treated her after he found out who she was. On the other end, Manager Lee couldn't help greeting Chin Mo when he saw him. "Young Master Chin." The police had arrived as well. After finding out about the drugs, they had planned to take action immediately. Fortunately, Chin Mo had arrived in time. He had called Director Huang since most people didn't know Chin Mo's identity. Without Director Huang's call, the police wouldn't have been mobilized. Director Huang knew Chin Mo well. If there wasn't a case, he wouldn't have contacted him. Unless there was a case. Hence, the moment he hung up, Director Huang rushed over. By then, Chin Mo and the others were already in the surveillance room. With the youngster as a witness, they had successfully locked onto the drug addict who had bumped into him. "I have to report this case to the higher-ups and apply for a higher level of authority." Director Huang's voice was deep. Since the drugs were being spread in such a manner, it wasn't just a simple business. It was a large-scale organized drug trafficking. They had even processed the smell, which proved that their opponent wasn't easy to deal with. In the end, how did the drugs get in? How did they contact the buyer? Who was the one who avoided the surveillance at night and hid the drugs in the bathroom? Besides, it was rare to see such a drug trafficking method. There had to be something fishy going on. Director Huang hadn't experienced such a thing in years. Ever since Chin Mo had dealt with that bunch of people, drugs hadn't appeared in Jiang City again. Why did he sense a dangerous aura that signaled the arrival of a storm? Chin Mo was still watching the surveillance when he caught sight of the youngster lifting the lid of the sink. He glanced over, glancing at her. How did a rich young master know that it was easy to hide drugs in such a place? Bo Jio seemed to have noticed his gaze. She tilted her head and caught a flash of suspicion in his eyes. At the same time, she realized that her actions weren't appropriate in front of the camera. It could even be said that her actions were filled with loopholes. But even so, Bo Jio was still able to pull it off. She lifted her thin lips and her eyes curved into crescent moons. "When the girl bumped into me just now, she kept talking about the washroom. I found it strange, but fortunately, we went to the washroom to take a look." Manager Lee. That wasn't a look, it was a walk in the park. She was even more familiar with such matters than the police. But there wasn't a need to say such things in such a setting. Bo Gio glanced up at Chinamo. She wasn't sure if the Almighty would believe her. Even if he didn't, there was nothing she could do. The more she interacted, the harder it was to hide. Bo Gio was mentally prepared for this. What should we do now? Manager Lee asked. Chin Mo retracted his arm from the control panel, his voice calm. Put the things you found back in their original positions and pretend you don't know anything. Manager Lee was confused. What was young Master Chin going to do? Leave a few plainclothed policemen to patrol the toilet 24/7. Within a day, arrest all the people who take the goods from here. Chin Mo tapped his fingers and asked the same question. How many cleaners are in charge of the bathroom? After hearing this, Manager Lee subconsciously turned to the youngster. At this moment, Bo Gio understood the Almighty's entire plan. They would continue to place the bait. Not only would they not alert the enemy, but they would also think that it was safe and walk right into the trap. As for why they were asking about the cleaners in the bathroom, the reason was simple. Other than the staff of the nightclub, everyone had to go through a security check before entering the nightclub. Hence, they could basically confirm that someone from the inside had brought the drugs in. In terms of quantity, carrying so many drugs to work would be a psychological burden for anyone. No one would be afraid of being discovered when doing such a thing. If they were discovered, it would be a crime. Hence, they wouldn't do it. There was only one type of person who could easily bring such a large amount of drugs into the bathroom, and that was the bathroom cleaner. Usually, the cleaners of large entertainment venues would push a trolley with a medium-sized trash can to do the first thing in the morning. It was a natural tool for transporting drugs. No one would notice what was inside. Besides, only the cleaners wouldn't be noticed when they were cleaning the bathroom. Besides, they would be able to check if there was anything wrong with the goods during their shifts. This meant that the person transporting the drugs was definitely one of the cleaners. Bo Gio wasn't sure how the girl knew the drugs were in the bathroom. She must have seen it while following the drug trafficker. Chapter 9:18. Manager Lee didn't understand why both of them were asking about the cleaners, but since young Master Chin wanted to know, it wasn't a small matter. A phone call immediately summoned the personnel of the Human Resource Department. Young Master Chin, this is the information on the employees in charge of cleaning at Yisei. There are a total of 12 people and they all work in 2 shifts. These people aren't very educated and they aren't very young. There are aunties and uncles, and they're basically all from the counties around Jiang City. If young Master Chin wants to look for them, I'll call all of them over now, Manager Lee said and was about to call them. There's no need. Chin Mo lowered his head and flipped through the document, his long fingers sliding across the surface. His side profile was elegant and handsome. Do you know where they are staying? Manager Lee glanced at the HR department behind him. The person replied immediately, Yisei has their own dormitory. Usually, the foreign employees who don't have a place to stay would stay in the dormitory. So all 10 of them are staying in the dormitory? Chin Mo's voice was calm. The person hesitated for a moment. I think so. I think so? Chin Mo lifted his lids and glanced at the person. The person shuddered. When they came, they registered to stay in the dormitory, but I haven't done the report for this year's occupancy. Hence, I'm not sure if they are still staying in the staff dormitory like before. As soon as Manager Lee heard this, he knew that this employee had made a mistake in his work. He narrowed his eyes. Go and ask them where they are living now. Yes. The person could tell from Manager Lee's tone that he wasn't happy. At this moment, the silver-haired youngster who was resting on the counter jumped down and blocked his way. It's fine if you ask, it would make people wary. Since you are in charge of the HR department, it shouldn't be a problem to arrange for a new cleaner to enter the company. A new cleaner? The person was confused. He turned towards Manager Lee. Manager Lee was confused too. Bo Gio smiled, lifting her chin with a devilish smile. Me, the Supreme Alliance's face. Manager Lee was about to retort young Master Gio for joking at a time like this. Just then, he heard a cold and indifferent voice. What is the Supreme Alliance's face going to do? Manager Lee turned around abruptly and looked at Chin Mo. No way, was young Master Chin serious? I'm going to dress up as a high school student who dropped out of school to play games. Now that I'm in a foreign land, I'm going to find a job. Bo Jio smiled happily. Brother Imo, what do you think? Chin Imo glanced at her, his voice faint. One day, you can't really stay. Report tomorrow morning and leave at night. All right. Bo Jio placed one hand into her pocket, her lips still curved upwards. There was something hidden in the corner of her eyes. But Chin Mo's next sentence was the main point. Manager Lee, prepare 2 sets of clothes for the cleaners here. I will be joining this guy at the same time. Bo Jio. If Manager Lee had only been shocked before, then he was completely shaken now. His throat moved back and forth. Young Master Chin, did I misunderstand your meaning? Asking the young master of the Chin family, who was extremely powerful in Jiang City, to be a cleaner in their house? Was simply asking for his life. Bo Jio didn't think it was reliable either. She leaned over and whispered, Brother Imo, aren't you a neat freak? How did you disguise yourself as a cleaner? I still have you. Chin Imo glanced at the clean and exquisite face in front of him, resisting the urge to pinch it. His pleasant voice was as usual. You can do the cleaning when the time comes. Bo Jio. She was only convinced by the Almighty for someone who could say such shameless words so calmly. Manager Lee couldn't hear their conversation. He stood at the side, his gaze drifting. He had heard that young Master Chin treated the youngster differently, but he hadn't dared to think that way. After all, the Chin family's teachings wouldn't allow such things to happen. Even though young Master Jio had changed a lot, he was still a boy. Before this, Manager Lee hadn't expected the rumors to be true. After all, young Master Chin had never allowed anyone to whisper in his ear. I'll get someone to prepare it now. Manager Lee was a smart man. He knew when to speak up. Chin Mo nodded and didn't say anything else. By now, Manager Lee also understood that it was best to follow the procedure and try not to alert the enemy. The bathroom was restored to its original state. According to Chin Mo's instructions, there were plainclothes policemen patrolling the area. Especially when the cleaners went in, they had to follow them. Actually, it was easy to find out who had planted the drugs in the bathroom. But the important thing wasn't the person who planted the drugs but the person who gave them the drugs. Hence, they couldn't act rashly. They couldn't arrest the culprit immediately. They would use the bait to find more clues. That was Chin Mo's and Bo Jio's goal. Once again, the two of them had the same thought. The disguise was necessary. Actually, Chin Mo didn't have to do it personally. But it was obvious that someone hadn't learned his lesson. The night continued. No one knew what had happened in the bathroom. But the crowd had seen the police coming. If they left quietly, it would be suspicious. Hence, they walked into the main hall as though it was a routine inspection. Even though it was a routine inspection, the crowd was still a little restrained when they were having fun. After the police left, all of them released their natural instincts. Nightclubs were meant for people to drink and get drunk for the day. The dimmer the lighting, the more likely it was to be licentious. The boy from before had hooked up with an uncle. The uncle had a family and had a child. But that didn't stop him from asking him out. Moreover, he should have taken a liking to him. The boy glanced at the room card in his hand. His body slumped against the uncle's body. Society isn't fair to groups like us. I can understand how you feel. You definitely don't want to go home and see your wife's face. Regardless of whether it was a female or male mistress, they would always say the same thing. I don't have any feelings for her. Don't think that I have everything. Actually, I'm not happy at all. Does she know who you are? Of course not. I can't tell her. I can only relax outside like this. Sigh, I understand. The boy placed his hand on the uncle's chest. There was a deep meaning in his voice. I will accompany you today. The man grabbed his hand. He looked as though he wanted to go to the room immediately. When Bo Jio and Chin Mo passed by, they saw such a scene. The boy still felt that he was rather noble. He lifted his chin and followed the man anxiously. Bo Jio and Chin Mo weren't people who liked to express their opinions. But they still felt disgusted when they met such a man and a male mistress. This had nothing to do with sexual orientation. If you liked a man, don't get married. Since you are married and can have children, live a good life. If you don't want to, get divorced. He was such a scumbag. He had ruined a woman's life and yet he said that he was wronged. Did he even have any shame? But it was probably because there were too many animations and novels that beautified the relationship between men. That was why some people felt that true love was only between men. Even some men who were married used such ridiculous words as an excuse. Love didn't discriminate between genders. But betraying his wife and child. Regardless of whether he liked a man or a woman, he was a scumbag. Needless to say, the boy was debauched to a certain extent. This was the situation in the circle that was closer to reality. This was also why even though Yun-Hoo was in the circle, he didn't let Lin Feng come into contact with such things. He was worried that the guy would think that he liked him because he needed to solve something. He liked a certain guy because he had liked him since he was young. He liked Lin Feng as a person. After that, it was gender. Hence, when Bo-Jio returned, she asked Yun-Hoo a question in a low voice. Yun-Hoo glanced over and said, "I won't get married. Even if a woman is willing to be with me, I don't want to harm her. If the name on the marriage certificate isn't that guy's name, it's useless to me." The more Bo-Jio listened, the more she felt that her naive and sweet senior would be defeated by such a deep love. But Lin Feng probably didn't notice it at all. When Bo-Jio and the others returned, she was whispering to Yun-Hoo. She leaned over and pulled the youngster over. She was still holding a wine bottle in her hand. Then she grabbed her hair, looking extremely troubled. "There's something. Analyze it for me." "It's about who?" Bo-Jio loved to analyze. "What is it?" "Actually, it isn't whose problem." Lin Feng had indeed drunk too much. He lowered his head and swayed. "I don't know what's wrong with my mother. Recently, she has been asking me not to touch who. Don't you think it's weird?" When Bo-Jio heard this, she roughly understood what he meant. She laughed so hard that her shoulders shook. Mother Lin was too adorable. Only a biological mother would do something like that. "Little Spade, why do you keep laughing? Analyze it for me." Lin Feng swayed again. Bo-Jio reached out and patted his shoulder. "Senior, good luck. After all, even your biological mother thinks that you are the one trying to turn almighty Yun gay and not the other way around, of course." Bo-Jio wouldn't say the last sentence. "Good luck? What did he have to good luck for?" Lin Feng's brain seemed to be stuffed with a lot of paste. Lin Feng's alcohol tolerance was surprisingly good. Other than the fact that he wanted to understand something, he couldn't think straight. Everything else was surprisingly quiet. After a short while, he fell asleep on the sofa hugging the wine bottle. Indeed, it was time to disperse. Bo-Jio wanted to send Yao Yao back, but she sensed that Yao Yao had her own matters to attend to. She didn't need to send her back since someone was waiting for her. Uncle Ian and the others called for a cab. Only Bo-Jio, Chin-Mo, and Yun-Hoo were left. Bo-Jio watched as Lin Feng slept soundly on Yun-Hoo's back. He was so drunk that he couldn't resist at all. It seemed like Senior Lin wasn't aware of what he was guarding against. Yun-Hoo knew how painful it was to be woken up in the middle of sleep. Moreover, it was already very cold outside, so he decided to book a private room in the night. "I'll stay here with him for the night." "All right, Brother Mo and I will be leaving first." Bo-Jio lifted her lips. She could tell that Almighty Yun had played a part in Senior Lin's drunkenness. Just as they left, Yun-Hoo turned his head. Yun-Hoo, who was carrying Yun-Hoo, turned his head. That position made it easy for him to kiss him. His thin lips brushed past the corner of Lin Feng's mouth. At first, he thought everything was over. Who knew that he wasn't awake yet? His gaze wasn't fixed. His dazed expression challenged Yun-Hoo's patience. "Where are we going? A competition? I haven't mastered my tower stealing skills." He was obviously still drunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to participate in a competition at this time. Lin Feng was really drunk. He was quieter. Even when Yun-Hoo said, "Go to sleep," he didn't stand on end like he usually did. Instead, he looked at Yun-Hoo cautiously. Instead, he nodded. It's time to sleep after drinking too much. It wasn't easy for Lin Feng to remember this. Yun-Hoo was clear about it. When Lin Feng was drunk, he wasn't as wary of him as he usually was. Hence, they could sleep together after a competition like before. Ever since this fellow knew his intentions, he didn't seem to avoid him on the surface, but in reality, he had restrained some of his intimate actions. Only when his thoughts were not so clear could he be so close to him like he was now. However, there was one thing that made Yunhu's gaze tremble after he closed the door to the private room. It was because he was taking off his clothes. It's so hot, where exactly is this? Why isn't there any air conditioning? Lin Feng said as he tore his collar, revealing a large patch of jade-like skin. Because of the alcohol, there was a faint pinkish tint to it. Forget it, I'm going to take a shower. Yes, a shower. It stinks, it's too smelly. Drunkards were not only defenseless. Similarly, they would release their natural instincts to a certain extent. As Lin Feng spoke, he lowered his head to undo his belt. Yun, who watched the scene, his feet seemed to be rooted to the ground. He had to clench his fists to suppress his urge. However, the drunk Lin Feng didn't notice it at all. He couldn't undo his pants. Seeing that his good brother was there, he walked over. His body was still swaying and his words were still stuttering. Help me undo it. Why is it getting tighter the more I undo it? As Lin Feng spoke, he pulled Yunhu's hand over and placed it on his pants in a manly manner. He finally lifted his face. His white shirt was half unbuttoned, his skin as fair as jade and snow, matching his current requirements. Chapter 9:19. The night outside was getting darker and darker. In the military courtyard, at the Qin family's house, movie queen En, who had just landed, was sipping on her tea. She had booked a plane ticket so suddenly. Her tiredness only added to her charm. Which means Jiao has been sleeping at home for the past few days? Movie queen En placed her teacup down and glanced at Madame Zhang. There were some things that Madame Zhang couldn't say. But movie queen Anne's heart skipped a beat because of her expression. I never expected them to have such feelings for each other. Madame Zhang didn't know what to say. After all, it wasn't easy to accept a man liking another man. Madame Zhang was just about to speak. Movie queen and inhaled deeply and interrupted her. Let me think about it. Indeed, she had to think about it. She only had one son. There were people with similar sexual orientations in the entertainment industry. Movie queen and had friends who were like that. But when such a thing happened to her son, she couldn't make a decision so quickly. But thinking about it carefully, she had never worried about her son since he was young. But as a mother, in order to pursue her career, she didn't take good care of the family. As a result, the child was born with a low need for relationships. When he was 5 or 6 years old, he would remind her to take care of herself because of her abnormal routine. It was hard for an ordinary child to mature so early. No matter what decision they made, her son wouldn't cry or make a fuss. Even then, he was sent to Los Angeles under his father's care. He didn't say anything. He had always been outstanding. In today's terms, it was a miracle that he didn't go astray. He was outstanding to the point that when that happened, it was then that movie queen and realized how much she owed her child all these years. Her son was indifferent and didn't care much about relationships. But once he cared, he wouldn't let go. Even she couldn't predict the consequences. What happened back then couldn't happen a second time. But she couldn't accept it immediately. For a moment, she wanted to blame the boy. But the thought of him being Jiao, she couldn't blame him. Every time she saw the youngster, she wanted to raise him as her second son. How could she bear to blame him? Wasn't it good to be brothers? Why did the plot go astray? The more movie queen and thought about it, the more worried she became. But she also understood that Jiao was probably not the one who took the initiative in this matter. She knew her son all too well. He could bend others, but if others tried to bend him, they would most likely be crippled. Or did her son have feelings for Jiao that were different from other people from the beginning? Movie queen and was indeed a smart person. She wasn't just smart. In her position, she was more magnanimous than others and considered things from a comprehensive perspective. What's more, she knew her son. I still want to carry a grandson. Movie queen and looked at Madame Zhang, acting coquettishly like a daughter. Auntie Zhang understood. She also wanted to see young master have a young master one day. Movie queen and retracted her gaze. Instead of talking to Madame Zhang, she was persuading herself. But this is his life after all. What he wants is the most important. But will he be able to lead a good life in the future? You also know that Qin Mo doesn't seem to be in love, but once he is, his entire being will sink into it. Aunt Zhang was not in a position to give an answer. She knew that someone as wise as Madame did not need an answer from her. But if it's Gio, it's still acceptable. Movie queen inside. I never expected that one day, my almighty would become my daughter-in-law. I really can't accept it. Madame Zhang. Madam, if boss heard what you said, it wouldn't be good, you know? That's good too. Movie queen and was serious. No one else has such a handsome daughter-in-law who can play games so well. In the future, I can poach Gio from Supreme Alliance and bring him into the entertainment industry to film a movie with me. By then, Mo wouldn't be able to stop me even if he wanted to since I'm his mother-in-law. Wait a minute, Gio should be my daughter-in-law and not my son-in-law, right? Madame Zhang replied, this should be. Even though she didn't know much about the relationship between boys, with young master's personality, he wouldn't give himself to anyone, right? After movie queen and thought it through, she reverted to her usual temperament. She leaned against the sofa lazily, still wearing a long white dress with a pure red cloak. Her figure was perfect, her wide sleeves caressed her face, accentuating her beauty. She smiled excitedly. I'll ask Mo some other day, if he's the one below, that would be amazing. This was indeed Madame's idea. Madame Zhang couldn't help thinking while being impressed. Perhaps this was the difference between the Qin family and the Qin family. Only a family like the Qin family could raise someone like the Almighty. It wasn't without reason. It wasn't just money and power, it was also his way of thinking and values. Hence, there was only one Qin Mo in the entire world. That night, Qin Mo didn't return home. If he had returned, he might have been able to hear Movie Queen and Madame Zhang's conversation. Movie Queen and thought that since the two kids had developed a certain level of relationship, she should visit Gio's mother. Should she pay Gio's mother a visit too? Movie Queen and had always been a person of action. But the moment she stood up, she suddenly thought of something. She had agreed to the relationship between the two kids. But what about Gio's family? Movie Queen and decided to test the waters. As for how she would do it, she had to think carefully. Since her son was already gay, she would rather find someone she didn't like. Gio was still more likable. Movie Queen and had many friends, but she had never interacted with the Fu family. She didn't even know Gio's mother's name. It seemed like she had to find someone to find out more about it and get closer to her. Movie Queen Anne's eyes lit up. Suddenly, she thought of something and called a friend. Her friend specialized in plastic surgery and women's clubs. She was famous for being rich and well-connected in the socialite circle in Jiang City. But when she saw Movie Queen Anne's call, she became as happy as a child. Sisterin, why are you so free to contact me? Have you finished filming? I'm taking a few days off. Movie Queen Anne smiled faintly. Isn't there a gathering at your place? It seems like all the ladies in Jiang City will be there. I want to join in the fun. Hearing that, the man felt as if he had won the lottery. Mizzen, are you serious? You're coming? Of course. Movie Queen Anne retorted. When have I ever lied? No, I just can't believe it. Mizzen is coming. I have to ask someone to prepare the best red wine. The man was so happy that even the people around him were curious about what had happened. Who is Mizzen? After she hung up the phone, a few rich ladies asked, who is she? A few of the rich ladies asked, who is this? Even our female Seo treats him with respect. She chuckled lightly and waved to her female friends. The group of women leaned over and heard her say a name. Everyone's expression changed. Gosh, how do you know her? I have some connections with my father. Is she really as pretty as she looks in the movies? You just called her sister, but why does she look younger than you? She's prettier in person. But I heard that celebrities usually have people behind them. Could it be that she's one of them? Her gaze dimmed. She isn't. It's fine if you think about others in the past, But don't think about sisterin. Be careful or you'll get yourself into trouble. It's my fault, it's my fault. I was just asking, don't be angry. Since the movie queen is coming, shouldn't we change the guest list? Don't invite those small businesses, like the one from the fried bun shop and the one from the countryside with the surname he. People like them will lower their standards. She was a businessman. Even though she wasn't the best, she had basic etiquette. I've already sent out the invitations, but the guest list won't be changed. Also, don't say such things in front of sisterin, she doesn't like it. Are you serious? How can a celebrity be so ignorant? She isn't ignorant, you'll understand when you meet her. She doesn't need to look at her family background like you and me. Juan, what are you saying? I'm being too. I was talking about you and me, I'm included. After all, she was the It's for your own good, there will be too many people at the gathering. Besides, He Hongwa's son has been doing well recently, even my daughter is asking for his autograph. You should change your mindset. I know you used to be close to Su Mei and didn't like He Honghua, but it's different now. She hasn't done anything bad to you, so it's good for you to give her a way out. He's just a gamer, how good can he be? Can he be compared to my son? No matter what, he has entered the industry and is a celebrity. Juan, can I bring my son to meet movie queenin? Sure, but Guorong, don't be too obvious, it's just a gathering tomorrow. Don't worry. Even though he said so, Yang Huan was still worried. With Guorong's attitude, it was hard to believe that she wouldn't do anything. But the gathering couldn't be rescheduled. It wasn't easy for sisterin to come, so she couldn't let her leave in disappointment. On the other side, after movie queen and hung up, she started to admire her intelligence. Using this method, it wouldn't be too abrupt to bump into Mrs. He at the party without anyone noticing. She had to buy a gift. Forget it, she couldn't buy a ready-made one, it wasn't sincere. Oh right, I have a bracelet that doesn't care about skin color. Madam, he will definitely like it. Madame Zhang watched silently as her madam prepared for tomorrow's meeting, preparing the gift and trying on the gown. It was an indescribable feeling. Was she already going through this process so soon? Madam hadn't agreed at the start. Actually, movie queen and had thought it through because she didn't want to see her son continue living like before. The youngster's appearance had changed a lot. That was the first time she had seen her son care about someone. That was enough, she didn't care about the gender. Outside the window, the trees swayed like a painting. The Fu family's villa wasn't guarded like the Qin family's. Chen Xiaodong hugged the blanket, asking his young master once more, "Young Master Qin, are you really going to stay here?" Bo Jiao couldn't do anything about it. After leaving the nightclub, the Almighty had given her two choices, he could either sleep at his place or hers. Bo Jiao had analyzed the situation and decided it was safer to sleep at her place. That way, she could use the excuse that her bed was a single bed and let the Almighty sleep in the guest bedroom. This time, he had indeed miscalculated. He Honghua was the happiest. She had prepared a pile of supper. He Honghua was still the same. Even though she came from the countryside, she was still magnanimous and candid. Her family had always been like this. They didn't eat any delicacies, but the food they made had to be Jiao's favorite. Qin Mo didn't come for nothing. A casual question had allowed him to learn a lot about her childhood. But Jiao is different now. In the past, he wouldn't be able to take anything bitter. Now, he likes to drink coffee and even bought a piano. I wonder how much he has learned behind my back. All mothers love to praise their children. He Honghua was no exception. The moment she mentioned Jiao, her round face would be filled with smiles. Qin Mo's hand paused. Even if it was a second personality, his taste buds wouldn't change. What exactly was wrong with her? The conversation between the two did not continue. Firstly, it was too late. Secondly, Bo Jiao had come down and interrupted their conversation. She had overheard their conversation when she had walked over. If she continued, the Almighty would only be suspicious of her. The room is ready, Brother Mo should rest early? Bo Jiao arched a brow. Coincidentally, Qin Mo wanted someone to check on something, so he replied faintly, "All right." Bo Jiao smiled at the unexpected success. As expected, her house was relatively safer. After Chin Mo left, Bo Jio started discussing serious matters with Hee Honghwa. Bo Jio started to talk business with Hee Honghwa. Mom, do you have the school's contact details? If you do, can you help me contact our year's director? Year's director? Hee Honghwa thought that something had happened. Is it because you've been focusing on the competition recently that the school isn't happy about it? Bo Jio smiled faintly. Mom, it's not that, I'm looking for accommodation. Accommodation? Hee Honghwa's voice rose sharply. Bo Jio immediately reached out and covered her lips, afraid that the person in the guest room upstairs would hear them. Bo Jio pressed her fingers against her lips and made a shushing gesture. She lowered her handsome face and said, Mom, I'll only stay for 2 weeks. If I'm not used to it, I'll come back. The first half of her sentence was true, but the second half. In 2 weeks, both the National League and Fu Zhongyi would end. Chapter 920. The dorms are all guys, how are you going to stay there? Hee Honghwa was worried. Why did you suddenly decide to stay in school? You've been staying at home for so many years. Don't worry, I won't be discovered. The beds are bunk beds, I'll get a top bunk. Bo Jio hugged Hee Honghwa's soft shoulders. I'm in my 2nd year of high school, staying in school will give me more time to study. Besides, it's a crucial period for the Fu Corporation, so I won't stay at home. That way, you won't have to cook for me. You've gotten skinnier from the competition, and now that you're resting for 2 days, you have to eat at home. Hee Honghwa was adamant about this. Bo Jio smiled. I'll come back during the holidays, once a week. In reality, she would still come back. It would be easier for her to investigate in school and hide her identity. But in the Fu family, there was a temporary disguise room she had created which would make it easier for her to do many things. But she wouldn't tell Hee Honghwa about it. She didn't set up the internet terminal at the Fu family's house because she was worried that someone would target Hee Honghwa if anything went wrong. Firstly, she wasn't sure who the crime squad was, and secondly, the person who impersonated her hadn't been caught. She couldn't risk Hee Honghwa. In the past, she had no worries because she was alone. Now, she had something she wanted to protect, be it Supreme Alliance or this mother in front of her. The more Hee Honghwa looked at her Jio, the more handsome she became. She hadn't realized it in the past, but now that she had her own plans for every decision, she felt both comforted and melancholic. Are you free these 2 days? Will you be at home? Mom has a gathering I want to bring you to tomorrow. Tomorrow? Bo Jio hesitated. Hee Honghwa immediately asked, Are you busy? It's fine. I do have something tomorrow, but when is the gathering? I'll try to finish it as soon as possible. Bo Jio always doted on Hee Honghwa. The middle-aged Hee Honghwa enjoyed this. Tomorrow night, it's a gathering organized by a friend. They are all from all walks of life in Jiang City. I just took over some of the Fu family's decisions, and it wouldn't be appropriate if I didn't go. You know a lot while Mom doesn't know anything. I'll feel more at ease with you around. All right. Bo Jio glanced at the time. Where is it? I should be able to finish my work by 7 o'clock. Then, I can go in with Mom to get some food and drinks. Who wouldn't like having such a child by their side? Hee Honghwa's chubby face beamed with joy. You must like that place too. Didn't you always want me to bring you to these upper-class gatherings? Now we finally have a chance. Mh, Bo Jio replied. She didn't deny what had happened in the past. The more differences there were, the more information would be exposed. Some things were better left unsaid. If it was a party, it seemed that she had to bring an extra suit with her. Because he was moving with the Almighty, he had to pay attention to certain things. To avoid getting more and more information that could be used against me. Hence, the next day, when she woke up early, she met Director Huang and Manager Li and received the set of cleaning uniform. She didn't show any signs of familiarity. Instead, he was like a novice in disguise, struggling for half an hour before coming out of the changing room. Chin Mo was already waiting on the sofa. Although he was wearing a cleaner's uniform, it didn't reduce his nobility. Instead, because of the blue and white uniform, he was especially eye-catching. Bo Jio arched a brow, her lips lifting into a smile. She whistled. Handsome. Chinamo glanced up at the youngster. Her head was still covered with a head of messy silver hair. She looked like a princess who had just showered, shaking her hair to attract his attention. Come over. Chinmo's voice was calm. When Bo Jio walked over, he stood up, placing his fingers on the youngster's head. His long fingers tidied her silver hair, the contours of his face similar to his voice, carrying a hint of nobility and aloofness. You're already so old and you don't even know how to comb your hair? Manager Li and Director Huang were still at the side. The latter was already used to it since he had always been bullied in the police station. The former didn't know if he should look at the two of them or somewhere else. Young Master Qin was so blatant with his homosexuality. Bo Jio glanced up. She didn't think much of it since he was just combing her hair. Chinamo didn't think much of it either. Wasn't it natural for him to do such things for the person he wanted to raise? Because they were so close to each other. Bo Jio could see clearly that when the Almighty lowered his lids, his eyelashes were like black feathers. They swept over her, tempting her to reach out and touch them. The reason Qin Mo lowered his lids was because he was tidying someone's collar. Bo Jio was different from Qin Mo, and it could be seen from the way they dressed. The youngster's style was always casual and cool. On the other hand, Qin Mo's clothes were straight and clean. With such a sense of abstinence, a thought would enter Bo Jio's mind from time to time. She wasn't sure if she wouldn't be able to control herself and do something that would cause her endless trouble when she left. Bo Jio adjusted her collar. Tight. Chinamo asked. Bo Jio replied, H. Chinamo reached out, adjusting it slightly. Manager Li coughed. Young Master Qin, young Master Jio, it's only 7 a.m. Do you want to have breakfast before heading over? It's fine, we'll be eating with our new colleague. Bo Jio smiled, a hint of mischief in her voice. It's easier to get information at the dining table. Manager Li. He hadn't expected young Master Qin to like this style. Besides, Manager Li, you don't have to follow us, just find an ordinary employee from the Human Resources Department. Don't reveal our identities. The more clueless they are, the more natural they will be. Bo Jio sat on the chair, bending down to tie her shoelaces. When she glanced up, she was already a refreshed cleaner. Both Qin Mo and Bo Jio had made some changes to their appearances, basically to lower their attractiveness. Qin Mo's face was too handsome, it wasn't easy to change. They could only start with the hairstyle. They couldn't tell if it was green or blue, but it dyed the strands of hair in front, giving it a hint of non-mainstream appeal. This was more like the youngster who had left home during his Chunibu period. But the advantage was that his face was good, it didn't look too ugly. Most importantly, it could change his aura, especially Qin Mo's. This way, people wouldn't be resistant. The Jiang group treated their employees well, hence, the dormitory wasn't too bad. But this was Jiang City, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, so they couldn't expect it to be good. The rooms weren't facing the sun, most of them were from other places, and it was an old building that hadn't been demolished. There were all sorts of clothes hanging on the railings and the smell wasn't good. From the first floor to the second, there was the smell of mold. Bo Jio wasn't bothered by her surroundings. She had assumed that a noble young master like the Almighty wouldn't be able to take it. But when she turned back, she realized that the Almighty's expression hadn't changed. He had blended in perfectly with the surroundings, just that he didn't speak much. He was as indifferent as ice to the employee who had brought them here, who was winking at him. That was when Bo Jio remembered that the Almighty had mentioned that he had grown up in the military. Even if he had forgotten the days they had spent together, it should be true. Which meant that the Almighty had probably received special training. Bo Jio smiled. That would be the year she had first crossed hands with the Almighty. It wasn't strange that she had been discovered. On the other hand, the employee's face turned cold when the handsome newcomer ignored her. He was just a migrant worker. She had seen plenty of arrogant people, but in the end, he had still succumbed to reality. Forget it, she didn't want to force him. This is the room. The employee stood outside the door with a key in her hand. There are 2 beds left, split them and see who sleeps. Just as the employee was speaking, a few men stood outside the door, washing up. The few men who were standing in the public area to wash up all looked over. After all, it was rare to see such a good-looking youngster here. Actually, the structure of the building was similar to the underground cellars in the capital. In the underground cellars, washing up was shared and there would be a queue when there were many people. "Manager, where did these two come from?" One of the middle-aged men spat the mouthwash in his mouth into the sink. He glanced over and laughed heartily, carrying with him the warmth of a foreigner. He was probably from around here since his accent hadn't changed. Many people said that the city was developing too quickly and that people would become apathetic due to the pressure. However, this problem didn't exist for the middle-aged man who wanted to work and earn his hard-earned money. He was very passionate. The employee replied calmly, "They are temporary workers from outside and are in charge of cleaning. You can bring them along today and see if they are suitable." "Sure. All right." The employee seemed to have thought of something, pointing towards Bo Jio's hair. "If you really want to keep them, make your hair color more normal. Our nightclub is different from the other nightclubs. We have high standards for our employees." Bo Jio didn't know that nightclubs regulated their employees' hairstyles. Jiang's management was rather interesting. "All right." The employee glanced over at Qin Mo. The employee glanced at Qin Mo again. Seeing that he didn't react, she couldn't be bothered with him and headed downstairs. No one in the tube-shaped department suspected Qin Mo and Bo Jio because of their daily behavior. But since they were new, there weren't many people who came over to talk. There were some who stayed in the same room. The middle-aged man walked towards Bo Jio with a basin. After taking 2 glances, he said with pity, "How old are you? Why are you working at such a young age? Why aren't you studying properly?" "Don't worry, big brother, I'm already an adult." Bo Jio smiled. "I'm just a little hungry. I've been away from home for a long time and I want to eat something hot." The middle-aged man immediately said, "Let's go in and put your things down. I'll introduce you to the people in the same room and then we'll go eat together. The canteen made Big Man to today. I'm sure you'll like it. She likes to eat everything." At this moment, Qin Mo spoke. His magnetic voice attracted the middle-aged man's attention. "Do you know each other?" Bo Jio smiled. "We came out to work together. There's no work at home." Her talent in imitating language was unparalleled. She had only heard a few sentences and she had already learned the intonation. The setting of a young internet addict that he had made up at the beginning was now useless. She might as well mix the truth with falsehood to make it easier for others to believe her. The middle-aged man heard Bo Jio's accent and felt closer to her. "That's right, there's no work at home. Come, these are the 2 beds, it's the same as some schools' bunk beds. The one beside you is also from our hometown. One of them doesn't have good hearing so he has to raise his voice when he speaks. The other one loves to drink and the last one doesn't live here anymore. I don't know where he got his money from but he will definitely bring us alcohol and cigarettes when he comes back." The big brother was really passionate towards Bo Jio and the others. In order to avoid suspicion, Bo Jio gave a brief explanation of everyone's situation. In reality, her focus was on the last one. Qin Mo glanced up and glanced at the bed with the half-folded blanket. The 2 of them exchanged glances. They had a tacit understanding. It's the weekend and everyone is working the whole day. He will definitely be back soon. You guys are in luck. The middle-aged man didn't know that it wasn't a matter of luck. Qin Mo and Bo Jio had chosen to sneak over today because they knew that everyone was working the whole day. The 2 of them were led to the canteen by the big brother. The canteen was extremely noisy. Fortunately, the phone the big brother was using was made in China and the volume was very loud. The moment he glanced up, he saw Qin Mo and Bo Jio's target. Zhao Debao. Zhao Debao was tall and sturdy. If Bo Jio and Qin Mo hadn't come, he would have been the youngest cleaner. He was eating his mantou in big mouthfuls when he saw 2 unfamiliar faces. He frowned. Qin Mo took note of her reaction. They are on guard. Their first reaction is to suspect us. That was why one shouldn't provoke a psychologist. Subtle expressions could read one's mind. Zhao Debao was actually afraid, but he felt that even if the police were to investigate, they wouldn't be able to trace it back to a cleaner like him. But the supplier warned them to be more vigilant. "These 2, the big brother replied passionately, We are from the same hometown. There isn't much work at home, so we came out to earn some money. They came to Jiang City to earn money at such a young age? Zhao Sanbao sized up the two of them. Bo Jiao and Qin Mo allowed him to size them up. The former scratched her head in embarrassment. She didn't take the initiative to speak to Zhao Sanbao. Instead, she asked the middle-aged man, "Big brother, where do we get the man to? My cousin and I are about to starve to death." Zhao Sanbao had his own thoughts. If there was someone here who would listen to him completely, he would be able to release the mantu from the other washrooms at the same time. The two of them didn't seem to be a problem. It would be better to rope them in after some time. With that in mind, Zhao Sanbao took out his food card. "I have mantu, you don't have a food card. Take it, brother Zhao is treating you." This. Bo Jiao glanced at the food card but didn't take it. "Brother Zhao is giving it to you, just take it." The big brother was always enthusiastic. Chapter 921. 7 to 800 a day? Is there really such a good business? Bo Jiao's eyes lit up, but she was still hesitant. "That's impossible." Zhao Sanbao knew that the two of them were inexperienced. The more inexperienced they were, the easier it would be for them to help him. "Why is it impossible?" "Brother Zhao will tell you the truth. He sells cigarettes and earns the difference in price." "Cigarettes?" Bo Jiao lowered her lids, a smile on her face. "We'll follow brother Zhao from now on." Zhao Sanbao also had other reasons for using these two people. Recently, the police had been too strict. It was relatively safer to let these two people stand guard. The most important thing was that if there was any sudden inspection, he could let these two people stand guard for him and let them carry the goods. If the situation was not right, he could still escape. At 1:30 p.m., Zhao Sanbao found someone to cover for him. He brought the two of them out of the shop. This was the perfect time to take the goods because there would be a cleaning at 6 p.m. He could take the opportunity to place more goods. It had to be said, the drug dealers at the bottom of the hierarchy would always choose places that no one would expect. In an alley near Yisei, there were many people coming and going. All kinds of people were from other places who came here to work. It was a temporary factory that was still under construction. On the right was a makeshift house. Zhao Sanbao didn't allow them to follow. "Wait here." "Okay, brother Zhao," Bo Jiao replied. The two of them looked at Zhao Sanbao's back as he left, then looked at each other. "Cousin, do you have a lighter and cigarettes?" Qin Mo knew she had something to say. He took out a pack of cigarettes and placed one between his lips. He took out a pack of cigarettes and put a cigarette between his lips. It was windy. Bo Jiao lowered her body and leaned over. "It's not a small place, but it should be their distribution department." Qin Mo replied, watching as the youngster lit the cigarette. His voice was calm. "You know quite a lot." Qin Mo replied. He watched as the youngster lit his cigarette and said faintly, "You know quite a lot." Bo Jiao paused and laughed. "I'm smart and handsome." At this moment, Qin Mo wouldn't ask too much about it. They had a basic tacit understanding. They would first deal with the outside before dealing with the inside. "He threw us here to test us." Qin Mo took a puff of his cigarette and reached out to pinch the youngster's face. He looked very handsome. "Keep your shameless words to yourself." Bo Jiao didn't expect her face to be pinched. She held the cigarette in her mouth in a daze. Then she arched a brow and reached out to rub her face. The two men did not call or inform anyone that they were there. It was because the angle they were standing at was facing the glass window of the simple room. This made it easy for the people inside to observe the people outside. Zhao Sanbao definitely wouldn't let them stand in this position casually. As expected, inside the simple room, a man with tattoos pulled open the blinds and looked at Bo Jiao and Bo Jiao. "You still dare to bring someone here when the limelight is so close? They don't know anything. They're just two country bumpkins who have never seen the world. They can't imagine what we're doing. Also, look at their outfits. They're so young. They can't be police." The tattooed man narrowed his eyes and put on his mask. He didn't say anything else. Unbeknownst to them, Their conversation was being broadcasted to the crime squad. Zhao Sanbao would never have expected Bojio to plant a small listening device on him the moment they first met. Now, there were more than 10 cars with police plates removed. They were waiting for the right time to act. Chapter 9:22. The tattooed man's phone rang. There was only one message on it. There's something wrong with the person in front of you, there's an ambush around, hurry up and retreat. The tattooed man narrowed his eyes, his expression changing. He pulled Zhao Sanbao over, his gaze fierce. Zhao Sanbao didn't understand. The tattooed man inhaled deeply, patting his face lightly. Get the two brothers outside to come in, let's have a good talk. Since there was an ambush, he had to think of a way to save his life. It was safest to have 1 or 2 hostages. Zhao Sanbao didn't know what had happened. He was still saying, is it safe to let them in? What if they know something and go out and spread the news? Go get them. At this moment, the tattooed man didn't think Zhao Sanbao was being considerate. Instead, he felt that there was something wrong with his identity, which was why he didn't want innocent people to be implicated. Zhao Sanbao didn't mind, he walked out and waved towards them. Qin Emo threw the cigarette butt into the rubbish bin, his voice calm. There's something wrong. Indeed. Bojio's gaze dimmed. The two of them stuffed a hand into their pockets, walking through the sand, looking suave. Zhao Sanbao was still thinking about how to get the goods. He hadn't expected his 2 underlings to enter. Someone locked the door behind them. Kacha. The tattooed man glanced up at the 3 of them, his gaze sending a chill down Zhao Sanbao's spine. Brother Long, this is... Before Zhao Sanbao could finish his sentence, the tattooed man whipped out a gun, causing his face to turn pale. Brother Long, the tattooed man was still wearing a mask, speaking slowly. There's something wrong with one of you. Zhao Sanbao instinctively turned towards Bojio and the others. Brother Long, I'm stupid, I really didn't expect them to be suspicious. The person I'm talking about? The tattooed man raised his hand. Zhao Sanbao's legs turned to jelly when the gun was pointed at him. When he had been transporting the drugs, he hadn't considered the possibility of being devoured by the evil dragon. Brother Long, how could there be a problem with me? The tattooed man didn't listen to him at all. He said coldly, search him. The person next to him pressed Zhao Sanbao against the wall and scanned his body with a seemingly simple but professional metal scanning device. Beep, beep, beep. When the voice rang out, Zhao Sanbao had no idea what was going on. What is this? The tattooed man's eyes turned cold. And you say you're fine. There was a cracking sound. His shoes trampled over it heavily. Listen to me, Brother Long. Bang. Before Zhao Sanbao could finish his words, the bullet directly pierced through his chest. It was as if killing a person was nothing to the tattooed man. However, he did not want to make a move here. After all, this was not the Golden Triangle. It would be very troublesome to be targeted by the police. However, Zhao Sanbao had been in contact with him for too long. If he had really been bribed by the police and revealed his information, it would not be safe. It was better to kill him. At this moment, Bojio and Qin Emo didn't move. They were like 2 inexperienced kids who were shocked by the situation in front of them. Boss, what do we do after we catch them? The person at the side asked. What about the 2 of them? The tattooed man wiped his gun. Scan them too. See if there are any problems. When the scanner slid past Bojio, Qin Mo's gaze wavered slightly. Boss, there's nothing. Boss, there's nothing. Nothing? Even Qin Emo arched a brow and looked towards the youngster. No one else could see their exchange of glances. Bojio lowered her head. She didn't say a word, but the smile that covered her trembling lips showed that she had been prepared for this. That's right, the tapping device on her body had already been transferred to the underling when he pushed her into the room. And without anyone noticing, the tattooed man glanced at Zhao Sanbao, who was lying on the ground. Carry this person out. Lock the 2 of them up as hostages. There are police outside. They can be used as life-saving amulets. If the tattooed man had seen Qin Emo before, he would never have made such a decision. He would never make such a decision. Instead, he would just raise his gun and kill him. It was a pity he didn't know how difficult it was to deal with the two people he had decided to tie up. The key case investigation unit saw everything that happened here, including the gunshot. At this moment, none of the crime squad members had reacted as deeply as Director Huang. How had he noticed something was wrong? And it was Qin Mo who had thrown out the bait. When Qin Mo and the others had just arrived, they had sent him a message, asking him to create an identity for Zhao Sanbao and announce it to everyone, saying that he was a police informant. The news had only been out for a short period of time and the other party had already found out about their actions. What did that mean? It meant that everything was as Qin Mo had said. There was a problem in the crime squad. Director Huang's gaze dimmed. His mood wasn't good enough. At this moment, the newly arrived criminologist was still boasting. Now that there's a problem with the informant, it's enough to show how cruel the drug trafficker is. I'll ask my friend in America to investigate his background. However, based on the analysis of his behavior, a typical local wouldn't be so cruel. He looks like a desperado, so we must not let him escape. As for the two hostages, go and check if they're really innocent. Who knows, it might be a trick played by the other party. Director Huang bolted upright. We have to ensure the safety of the hostages, everything else is a small matter. Are you saying that such a huge drug trafficking case is a small matter? The psychologist questioned before raising his hands. I understand. We have to protect them first, let's talk about the rescue plan. Director Huang knew that he wasn't on the same wavelength as the foreigner, hence, he alighted from the command car, heading towards the scene. In the simple house, Qin Mo and Bo Jiao were tied together with a rope. Their legs weren't tied because they still had to be brought along. Boss, what should we do? Are there policemen everywhere? One of them seemed to be panicking. The tattooed man raised his gun, leaning against the window as he watched the commotion outside, his lips curling into a vicious smile. Get a megaphone, we can negotiate with them. The man obeyed, his palms sweating due to his nervousness. What are you afraid of? Don't you know how many bombs are buried around here? A vicious glint flashed past the tattooed man's eyes. We'll blow up anyone who enters. Bo Jiao and Qin Mo, who were tied together, glanced down. They seemed to have a telepathic connection. Their gazes were in the same direction. It was a small remote control on the table. There wasn't a television or air conditioner in the room. This meant that the remote control was the key. Bo Jiao and Qin Mo had always done things differently. If not, Bo Jiao wouldn't have changed Director Huang's arrangements and moved the listening device. The tattooed man's words were clearly heard by Director Huang. This time, only Director Huang could hear the contents of the listening device. Hence, it was a top secret. But it was this sentence that sent chills down Director Huang's spine. He immediately turned to the people who were about to rush in. Stop the mission, stand by. What's the situation? Director Huang, we have to hurry to save the hostages and catch the culprit. Time is of the essence. The new criminologist was dressed in a suit, looking out of place. Director Huang knew that there was a spy in the crime squad, but he couldn't reveal the fact that there were bombs in the construction site. Because once he revealed it, the other party would suspect young Master Qin and the youngster's identity. If they were hostages, there wouldn't be any danger. But if they were from the police, the tattooed man would definitely kill one of them. But if they didn't say anything, how were they going to start the rescue? Or, could they only trust in that person's ability? They weren't sure where the bombs were buried. But there were more than 30 workers at the construction site. Even if they wanted to evacuate, they would need time. The radius of the explosion couldn't be predicted. What was more worrying was the kindergarten beside the construction site. Director Huang reached out to grab the few strands of hair he had left. Report to the higher-ups, it's classified, I'll report the current situation to General Qin. They had to send the special forces over. Then they would choose a long-range kill. They needed a sniper. However, before Director Huang could pick up his phone, a Special Forces soldier dressed in camouflage jumped down from a Land Rover, carrying a long black bag on his back. Director Huang. You are? Director Huang couldn't remember such a person. The Special Forces soldier was a man of few words. Ardwolf, young Master Qin sent me over. I think Director Huang needs a sniper. With that, he reached his hand out, allowing Director Huang to take a look at his unit number. It was the lightning symbol. Only those in high positions would know what it meant. It was the symbol of the International Special Forces. Why was it here? Director Huang straightened his back, wanting to explain the situation. Ardwolf glanced sideways and said in a calm tone, I already know. I need you guys to lure the other party to the window during the negotiation. However, it depends on the situation. Young Master Qin said that this person is a very important breakthrough point. Try to capture him alive. I will act according to the situation. With that, Ardwolf tore open the bag. It was an inch-caliber sniper rifle. Under ideal circumstances, it could shoot a human head at a distance of 2,000 meters without any adjustments. Give the order. Director Huang, who had been robbed of the chance to speak, finally believed that Qin Mo had sent them over. But more importantly, how did he know the drug dealers were negotiating with the police? Ardwolf frowned, placing the rifle down. The window is too small, it will be difficult to stop them, we might not be able to kill them. Director Huang's face fell. There are schools nearby. Director Huang. Ardwolf lowered his voice. At such a time, we can only trust young Master Qin. Director Huang stilled. Indeed, at such a time, he could only trust that person. He was the person who could single-handedly subdue a serial killer when he was still in high school. The new criminologist also recognized the gun that Coyote was carrying. At this moment, he was much quieter. Hence, he became much quieter as he realized something wasn't right. It was obvious that his realization had come a little late. No one in the simple house cared about the two people who were trembling in fear. The tattooed man had a total of 5 subordinates, all of them moving the goods and money. Be it the money or goods, it was a staggering amount. They were packed in luggage, piling on top of each other. Hence, they wouldn't notice the blade protruding from Bojio's sleeves. The blade was small, but it was useful in such a situation. The only person who noticed the youngster's movements was Qin Mo. Both of them had a tacit understanding. The moment Bojio moved, Qin Mo's long legs bent over, blocking her perfectly. Even if someone glanced over, they would see Qin Mo and not Bojio's movements. To Bojio, handcuffs were more convenient than ropes. After all, in such an era, few people would use ropes to tie people up. Simply put, she was good with machinery. Returning to the most primitive method required some time. Qin Mo took one look at the youngster's expression and knew she wasn't good with it. He moved his fingers, signaling for her to pass the blade to him. Bojio arched a brow. They touched. Strangely, when the blade was in the Almighty's hands, sparks seemed to fly. In less than 10 seconds, the ropes around her hands loosened. The two of them didn't stand up immediately after regaining their freedom. Qin Mo swept a glance at the two men holding the rifle before his gaze landed on the remote control. Bojio nodded. The next moment, they stood up simultaneously. The person closest to them was about to raise his gun when Qin Mo swept his long legs and leaned forward. The blade landed heavily on the person's wrist that was holding the gun. Ah! The person screamed in pain, attracting everyone's attention. The other man also raised his gun, but it was too late. The young man raised his leg and kicked the man's right hand accurately. Then, with a loud crack, the other party's knees bent, and he fell to the ground. After that, the two of them dodged to the left at the same time. It was because the tattooed man had turned around and fired 2 shots at them. The youngster's movements were always beautiful and smooth. The tattooed man cursed. His first reaction was to reach for the remote control. At this moment, Qin Mo was already holding the gun. Just as the tattooed man was about to raise his hand, he fired a shot. Bang! The gunshot fired in all directions. The tattooed man retracted his hand in pain. The youngster kicked the wall with her long leg. Using the recoil, she pounced forward, her palms on the table. With a somersault, she managed to grab the remote control. Chapter 923. There was a loud swoosh. It came from the blade in Chin Mo's hand. When it flew out, it was bound to cut his fingers. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a point of impact. But it was the wrist that was holding the gun that was cut. Ah! A painful cry rang out. The two men held onto their right hands. Just as they were about to raise their guns again, Chin Mo's gun was pointed at the tattooed man. Chin Mo's gun was already aimed at the tattooed man on the ground. He stood there, his left hand holding the gun. His right hand was dangling, blood dripping from his fingertips. However, this didn't affect his unique nobility. You don't want your boss to live? They were just two underlings after all. The moment they saw their boss being pointed at with a gun, they froze on the spot. The tattooed man clenched his teeth tightly. Even the remote control had fallen into the hands of the other party. This matter had cut off his last path of escape. His face was filled with unwillingness and hostility. Who exactly are you? Be it the youngster's skills or that beautiful flying knife, it wasn't something an ordinary person could do. They weren't even policemen. The tattooed man hadn't expected to land in someone's hands. He had been living a carefree life for so many years and had never suffered a setback. Moreover, he was in a continent with such low efficiency. Even though it was difficult for them to move the goods in terms of safety, in terms of skills and setup, as long as it wasn't the special forces, no one would be able to do anything to them. Outside the simple room, Director Huang was still worried. He could still hear sounds a moment ago, but after the gunshot, there must have been a problem with the listening device, as all he could hear was the sound of gunshots. But he had forgotten that they had a sniper. Aardwolf saw everything through the hole, calmly placing his gun down. Young Master Chin has gotten the remote control. The drug traffickers are under control. Director Huang, give the order. Director Huang stilled. A second ago, he had been restless, thinking about how to mediate the crowd and minimize the damage. This second, his emotions were indescribable. How strong were the two youngsters to be able to survive in such a short period of time? Director Huang didn't waste any time, giving the order immediately. The crime squad members split into two groups, rushing into the simple room. Aardwolf, who had set up his sniper rifle, had already left the scene, as if he had never been there. In the Land Rover, the man with the code name Magician wasn't in disguise today. He was dressed in military camouflage and looked extremely handsome. Where's young master? I'm fine. Aardwolf's answer had always been concise. Magician pursed his lips. I say, can't you say something more? For example, what's the situation with young master? Do we need to follow up? Or, Coyote glanced at him and interrupted, retreat. Don't even think about marrying a wife like this. Aardwolf reacted to Magician's words. He hesitated for a moment and decided to gossip. Young master is with that boy. Which boy? Fatty, who was sitting at the back of the car, straightened his back. If he didn't stick his head out, no one would be able to tell that he looked different in his military uniform. Aardwolf glanced at the crowd with his indescribable eyes. That boy. Everyone understood this sentence. Fatty's neck stiffened. It can't be. Young master has already shown off his love to such an extent that he's even bringing little Spade when he's doing business. The atmosphere in the car was too quiet. After all, none of them had expected that the first person to be single would be their boss. Wasn't that desireless man destined to become a monk? They had originally thought that even if they weren't at the starting line, they would at least be better than their boss in terms of finding a wife. What was going on? Was young master really moved? On this side, the few old men were still sighing about the impermanence of the world. On the other side, the viciousness in the tattooed man's eyes became more obvious. He was determined to get an answer so that he could take revenge in the future. However, he didn't know that he wouldn't have any chance to take revenge in the future. After the key case investigation unit came in, they handcuffed all of them. The tattooed man looked at Chinam. Why? You dare to arrest me but don't dare to tell me your name? Chinamo finally glanced at him, his tone calm. Is a loser worth telling me his name? With that, the tattooed man's face contorted in anger. Bojio only had one thought. Why did he have to resort to violence? In the future, she would let the Almighty do it with his mouth. At this moment, the tattooed man smirked coldly. Do you really think that you have one? You are so arrogant just because you have the remote control. Go tell your superior to release me immediately, otherwise, someone will blow this place up in half an hour. What do you mean? Director Huang frowned. The tattooed man glared at Qin Emo. If you want to know why, get this person to call me Grandpa. Director Huang had never seen such an arrogant criminal. The tattooed man had never been bothered by them. Even though he had been arrested, he knew deep down that as long as he had something on him, the other party wouldn't dare to do anything to him. Why aren't you calling me? Or do you think that someone will be able to remove all the bombs in half an hour? The tattooed man was handcuffed, but he didn't seem to be bothered by the people in front of him. Even within their organization, there was someone who held a high position. What could these small fries do? To put it bluntly, the Chinese were no different from pigs in his eyes. But the next second, the tattooed man's gleeful expression disappeared. It wasn't because of anything else but the silver-haired youngster's light chuckle. It's just a remote control software and you want the Almighty to call you Grandpa? As expected, losers like to dream. With that, the tattooed man turned abruptly. The youngster had already removed the remote control. She was looking at him with a dark gaze, as though the malice in her eyes was stronger than his. But even so, the tattooed man wasn't completely afraid. You found out? Heh, seems like you aren't that dumb. But so what if you found out? This activation software isn't something that can be easily deciphered. Is that so? Bo Jio stood up, stuffing a hand into her pocket. She glanced at him and smiled. That's a pity. I was fortunate enough to be one of the people who could decipher it. What? The tattooed man's expression changed, his eyes narrowing. His first reaction was disbelief. How was that possible? The program was created by that person. Unless he was one of the top 5 hackers in the world, it wouldn't be possible to decipher it. Huang, do you have a notebook? Bo Jio hesitated for a long while before deciding to call Director Huang. She didn't call him little because she wanted to save Director Huang some face since there were so many people watching. Director Huang didn't seem to feel that the youngster was saving his face. He coughed heavily, his voice rough. Are you really confident? Director Huang had his considerations. This wasn't a small matter and he couldn't make a rash decision. The new criminal psychologist had his own plans as well. The remote control is very intricate. I think we should wait for a professional to come. What about the time? Chinamo asked calmly. This made the man look over. Since there's no time, let's do as that desperado says. Mister, you probably don't understand, but I'm an expert in psychology. People like him will really do what they say, because in his eyes, human lives are nothing. It seems like there's someone who understands the situation. The tattooed man's lips lifted in delight. That makes things easier. Qin Emo didn't even glance over, turning towards Director Huang. Director Huang gritted his teeth. I'll send it over right away. Smith, who was dressed in a suit, was annoyed. Sir, did you hear what I said? I said, I know a little about psychology. Qin Emo interrupted him. This is China, my country. Do you think it's possible for my first criminal to come and leave so arrogantly? Mr. Smith, you probably don't know who I am, but there's a saying in China that you might be familiar with. With that, Qin Emo glanced up, his voice calm but piercing. Those who offend China will be punished no matter how far they are. Smith choked on his words and didn't say anything. The people standing around were all Huaxia natives. Who didn't have some hot-blooded manliness? How could they let him go just like that? If they didn't take a gamble, they would be letting down their clothes. At this moment, Director Huang had a backbone. No matter what Mr. Smith said, he would treat it as bullsh*t. Smith didn't know what else to say. More importantly, the other party knew who he was, but he hadn't received any information about him. Bo Jio swept him a glance. Once she returned to the Fifth Avenue, the first person she would harass had to be Smith. That's right, Bo Jio knew the expert in front of her. Smith hadn't even seen her once since they started fighting. How dare he claim to know her? What was even more unbelievable was that he had even mentioned psychology in front of the Almighty. This kid was really asking for trouble. Wasn't he going to rebuke him? Bo Jio chuckled lightly, taking a notebook from the crime squad. Her light laughter made the tattooed man's palms sweat uncontrollably. Kacha. Who knew what the youngster was thinking? She tilted her head and lit a cigarette. Just as everyone was looking over, Bo-gyo made a new move. The metallic lighter transformed into another form when the youngster lit the cigarette. The USB port was plugged into the laptop. Isn't that a lighter? Director Huang asked curiously. Bo-gyo passed the cigarette to him and smiled devilishly. It's a lighter, but it can be used as a USB drive when necessary. Director Huang was in disbelief. He glanced down at the thing that didn't look like a USB drive at all. The intricate patterns extended into the shape of a dragon and snake, giving off an indescribable aura. Where did this ninth young master get his hands on it? But this wasn't the time to be curious. More importantly, he had to use the remote to hack into the other party's computer and destroy the software used to control the bomb. That was the only way for everything to be safe. But could young Master Gyo really do it? Director Huang had heard many ridiculous stories about the youngster in the past. One of the stories was about how the youngster had been sent to the hospital after chasing a man. Director Huang felt uneasy. No one knew what the outcome would be. Time was still moving. This meant that danger was approaching. It's useless. Do you think you can just find anyone who knows how to run a computer? The tattooed man's voice rose. Click, click, click. The rhythmic tapping of the keyboard seemed to be used to shut him up. It was extremely fast. It was so fast that the youngster couldn't even see the words on the screen. Countless chat boxes opened at the same time, as though they were working on something. The youngster continued to type while explaining, "The program will leave traces of the other party's IP address. Use the surrounding computers to help me find them." But Director Huang had never seen anyone operate in such a manner, even as the director of the crime squad. The youngster lowered his lids. When his silver hair fell down, the corners of his lips curled up, revealing his canine teeth. It's simple. The speed of a computer depends on its operating memory. Take out all the memory and use it together. That way it'll be fast. Oh, found it. Found it? Director Huang couldn't understand what had popped up, but there was indeed a chat box paused on the screen. The next second, the youngster's fingers flew across the keyboard as though she was playing Chopin. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, after images visible as she lifted her hands. She was like a diving eagle. Nothing could stop her from invading and hunting. Right at this moment, the youngster paused, her beautiful brows arched. Director Huang started to panic. What is it? The other party has set up a special firewall, Bo-gyo replied as she typed. It will take some time to crack it. The tattooed man stood at the side. He had been through a lot. He glanced at the clock hanging on the wall and laughed mockingly. Director Huang, I've told you before, the software isn't something anyone can crack. There are still 24 minutes left. If I were you, I would change your mind. There's no need to change my mind. Bo-gyo glanced up. This level of firewall can be cracked in 2 minutes. The tattooed man's face turned green, his fists clenched tightly. Do you think you won't be discovered once you enter the firewall? Do you know who is guarding it? Your boss. Bo-gyo chuckled, replying nonchalantly. That is indeed frightening, but I'm good at concealment. She won't be able to find me at this level. Director Huang. You don't seem the least bit afraid, Gyo. The tattooed man understood that the youngster wasn't taking his words to heart. He wanted to see how long this fearless youngster could remain arrogant. Chapter 924. The atmosphere in the simple room became especially tense with the sound of the keyboard. It was like a race against time. Everyone knew that the most important thing to do in order to infiltrate the other party's computer was to finish what they wanted to do before the other party noticed. Which meant that she had to be fast. Not only did she have to be fast, but she also had to avoid the traps set up by the firewall. Director Huang watched as the youngster's fingers changed positions continuously. The screen seemed to have transformed into a regional network. The regional network was densely packed with defensive red lines, forming one checkpoint after another. All Bo-gyo had to do was to pass through the defenses without being discovered. The youngster's silver hair fell, her eyes dark. She didn't just have to type in the code, she also had to dodge. In reality, this was an opportunity for her. A chance to lock down the other party's base. But that would expose her intrusion. Hence, Bo Gio didn't check the region. Instead, she flew towards the hard drive. Found it, the youngster replied calmly. The tattooed man glanced up abruptly, his lips turning pale. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible. Bo Gio typed in a few codes to destroy the hard drive before pressing the spacebar. Director Huang watched as the other party's hard drive appeared on the screen. This was remote control, wasn't it? 1 minute. Bo Gio glanced at the time displayed at the side. The software required time to destroy, and once discovered, the firewall would be reactivated and it would take a lot of effort to attack. This meant that this minute was crucial. The tattooed man clenched his fists, breaking into a smile. You will definitely be discovered. Do you think it will be that easy? It seemed as though he was trying to prove his words. Suddenly, the laptop in Bo Gio's hands started beeping. The alarm caused everyone's heart to skip a beat. This is... Director Huang's expression changed. The tattooed man laughed heartily. Once the software is destroyed, the host computer will react and hunt down the intruder. I believe that since you know computers, you should be able to understand what I'm saying. Anyone could understand his words, even those who didn't know how to use computers. Director Huang placed his hand on the edge of the table, his brows furrowed as though he was trying to come up with a solution. Smith let out a long sigh. It seems like the god of fate isn't on our side. Director Huang, this isn't the time to be stubborn. Safety is the most important thing. If an explosion were to happen here, not only me, even you, as the person in charge of this case, would be fired. I haven't finished my game yet. What are you yelling for? She didn't even lift her head as she continued to tap on the keyboard, gesturing for them to look at the screen. The strange thing was that the destroy bar that had paused for a moment actually started working again. This is impossible. You should have been discovered. Otherwise, the alarm would not have rung earlier. The tattooed man's eyes widened. That's impossible. Bo Gio remained expressionless. Indeed, it was discovered, but it was the other IP addresses I set up. The firewall blocked those IPs as well. When your boss cleared those IPs, it would be enough for me to destroy the program. Didn't I tell you that I'm an expert in concealment? The tattooed man did not believe that such a technique existed. However, in the apartment on the other side of the computer, when the girl discovered that the IP address had been invaded, she sneered. Her fingers were flying, and after quickly eliminating one, she was about to teach the other party a lesson. However, he discovered that another attacking IP had appeared. The girl's eyes darkened, and she began to change her target. However, when she went over to clear it away, she discovered that it was just a remnant shadow. It was like a shadow clone in a game. He had clearly struck the other party's shadow, but when he finally reacted, he realized that he had only struck the other party's shadow. No one knew where the real person was hiding. At the end of the day, it was all because of the young man's amazing hand speed and hacking skills. The installation bar was running bit by bit, and it had already reached 90%. This number caused the tattooed man to shut his mouth. He had a strong build, but at this moment his eyes were trembling as he thought about the possibilities. How could this be? No one should be able to break through boss's defense system. At this moment, Bo Gio's left hand paused. This meant that the hunt was over. Her right hand pressed the spacebar, and with a click she lifted the corners of her lips, spitting out 2 words. K-O, buzz, buzz, buzz. This time, it wasn't Bo Gio's laptop that was buzzing. Instead, it was the main computer in the apartment. The girl's hand landed heavily on the black screen. Even now, she still wasn't sure what had happened to the firewall. Check, what was the other party attacking? The girl narrowed her eyes, her gaze deep and frightening. Who exactly was it, challenging her authority over and over again? The tall and slender man immediately activated the device. After less than 10 seconds, he lifted his head. The explosion program has been destroyed. Explosion program? The girl stilled, realizing the problem. She picked up her phone, dialing a string of numbers. The tattooed man's phone rang, but he wasn't in the mood to pick up the call. The countdown timer had stopped, which was a devastating blow to him. Just because he wasn't in the mood to pick up the call didn't mean it wasn't picked up. Chin Mo walked over, picked up his phone, and pressed the answer button. The girl wasn't stupid. Once she snapped back to her senses, she realized she shouldn't have made the call. She hung up immediately, removing the card from her phone. The tall and slender man watched her actions, his heart filled with unease. Something happened to the goods, it should be the crime squad. The girl tightened her grip on the phone, her voice heavy. Don't worry, I'll inform him, he will be fine. It's time to push our shield out. Look for Rao Rong, talk to him seriously, ask him if he still wants to save his father. The tall and slender man's features were sinister. Now that his expression had sunk, a menacing aura emanated from him. They better not go overboard or he would kill them all. The girl knew what he was thinking. Don't be rash, the crime squad is only so powerful because of Chin Mo. But after this, his power will be completely taken away. Without the sales point, it won't just be our profit that's affected. But we have to find out who exactly is messing with my business. The countdown timer stopped. Inside the simple room, the tattooed man glared at Bojio. Who exactly are you? A high school student. The youngster stood up, stuffing a hand into her pocket, a devilish smile on her face. You don't have to call me Grandpa, Daddy will be teaching you a lesson for free. You. The tattooed man's face contorted when he heard the term, Daddy. He wanted to retaliate but was stopped by the crime squad members behind him, pulling him into the police car. At this moment, Smith seemed to be in deep thought. Bojio paused for a moment. She thought that the other party had some information about her and would suspect her. Unexpectedly, he laughed, looking at her. You are really lucky, Z definitely isn't on the other side of the firewall. If he was there, you would have been caught long ago. But luck is also a part of victory. I wonder if you are interested in joining us and becoming one of my subordinates? Smith wasn't bad looking with his blue eyes. He looked at her affectionately since he was a fan of Oriental dolls. In his eyes, Bojio's looks were flawless. He believed that no one would reject such a good offer. Bojio stretched lazily, her voice calm. I'm not interested. With that, she reached out to grab his wrist. She lowered her head, looking at something. Needless to say, it was definitely a wound. Smith arched a brow in surprise. You probably don't know who I am or where I came from. Perhaps we can sit down and talk once you understand. Follow me to the hospital. Before Smith could finish his sentence, Bojio dragged Chin Mo away, not even sparing him a glance. It had to be said that at certain times, Gio's charm as a boyfriend was off the charts. For example, right now. The crime squad watched as the youngster walked forward viciously. Young Master Chin was held in his hand but he didn't say a word. It's really strange these days. Director Huang found it strange as well. Was Chin Mo the passive party when they were together? Director Huang trembled at the thought. He really couldn't accept it. Bojio did things quickly, especially when she wasn't in a good mood. The reason why she rebuked the tattooed man was because of the wound on Chin Mo's hand. She had already seen it. Both of them hadn't driven over and were still wearing the cleaner's uniform. The youngster hailed a taxi. Before the driver could speak, Bojio blocked Chin Mo in a corner. Without a second thought, she scooped up the bloody finger and placed it in her mouth. Disinfect it. The driver's hand slipped, almost crashing into the railing. Even someone as indifferent as young Master Chin paused for a moment. His deep eyes looked at the silver-haired, furry fellow in front of him. It was like a small animal, a canine, licking his wound. But even if it was a canine, he couldn't be too careful. A certain someone was a fox by nature, hiding too many secrets. If he wasn't careful, he wouldn't be fawning over him. Instead, he would be thinking of a way to leave. Chin Mo felt the warmth on his fingertips. When he touched the unique softness, he couldn't help lifting his finger, touching the soft asterisk. Bojio stilled, the tips of her ears turning red. After all, the Almighty's actions were too. Bojio opened her mouth, avoiding the Almighty's teasing. Chin Mo remained nonchalant. Aren't you going to disinfect it? It's done. Bo Gio straightened before glancing to the side. The Almighty must have done it on purpose. Chinamo pulled her back. Why do I feel like the disinfecting time isn't long enough? As he spoke, his porcelain finger touched her lips again. Just like that, it lightly brushed past her lips. It was like a feather falling, tickling her. At the start, Chinamo didn't think much of it. But when he caught sight of the youngster's flushed neck, he couldn't help lowering his head. He turned to the side, planting a kiss on the fair skin. Then he slowly slid down. Bo Gio trembled, unable to react in time. A wave of numbness washed over her. When Chin-mo kissed her, he would even consider the angle. With the board in the way and his body turned sideways, the driver in front couldn't see what was happening behind him. This was convenient for him. It was convenient for him to pull her into his arms and bully her viciously. The neck, behind the ears, and the back were the most sensitive places for young girls when they were growing up. Chin-mo chose these places as well. His thin lips slid along her neck, sometimes touching it with the tip of his nose. No matter what, it could make one's whole body go numb as if they had lost all their strength. Her body wouldn't be able to withstand the teasing of an expert like Chin-mo at her age. Bo Gio's ears turned redder as his hands entered her clothes. It was so red that it looked as though blood would drip from them. Chin-mo noticed it too, but he had never imagined that there would be a day when he would enjoy looking at someone's ears so much. They had originally been like white jade, a beautiful arc, but now, they were slowly changing color. There was an indescribable allure to them. Chin-mo's eyes dimmed, his breath inching over, landing on the back of her ears. His voice was low and raspy. Come back with me tonight. Bo Gio shuddered again. She pushed him away and adjusted her breathing. The Almighty was using his charm, she couldn't fall for it. The warmth in Chin-mo's eyes was extinguished a little as he watched her actions. Then he heard the youngster say, "Not tonight, I have something to do later." His deep eyes turned towards Bo Gio, his gaze deepening. All right. Chin-mo knew better than anyone else that he couldn't force her too much. He had many ways to make a certain someone go back with him, but if she wasn't willing to do it, then it would be meaningless. But there were some things that made him even more certain. The youngster in front of him didn't seem like the young master of the Fu family or a high school student. But there was nothing wrong with the information. Where exactly was it that he hadn't thought of? Chin-mo paused. Perhaps he should go through the information on the Fu family again, especially a certain someone's daily habits. What exactly was the reason for such a drastic change in a person? He was sure it wasn't a split personality. He was a psychiatrist and he had asked about the hospital she had stayed in previously. Everything was normal. But here came the problem. Hacking skills could be self-taught, but how was it possible to react on the spot? And why did she always want to leave him? Was there someone more important waiting for her? Chapter 9:25. The moment they alighted, Bo Gio's boyfriend Aura returned. The doctor glanced up for the third time. It's a small injury, there's no need to stay in the hospital. Just make sure it doesn't come into contact with water. The doctor wanted to tell her that it was just a cut and there wasn't a need to come to the hospital. Bo Gio was finally convinced, but at this moment, she paused and glanced up. He is a professional esports player and his hand is important to him. Do you want to take a scan to check his wrist? If you insist. The doctor didn't think there was a need, but the family member had requested for a scan. But why was there such a dumb person? It was just an external injury and they wanted a scan? The doctor shook his head. Chin-mo reached out to take the pen from the doctor's hand, his voice calm. There's no need, just prescribe some medicine for external injuries. The doctor let out a long sigh. Fortunately, this person still had some sense. Bo Gio wasn't aware that she was being treated as an irrational person. She took the prescription while instructing the Almighty, don't eat spicy food, don't smoke. With that, she paused and reached out to take the cigarettes and phone from his pocket. I'll help you settle this. Chin-mo arched a brow at the youngster beside him. Tell me, if you don't follow me back tonight, my hand won't be able to come into contact with water. How are you going to solve the problem of bathing? The doctor and the patients around them exchanged glances. Bojio paused. I really have something to do today. Tomorrow. Chin Mo agreed without a change in expression. Change the bandages tomorrow? You can't expect me to do it myself. Almighty Chin was indeed scheming. If Magician and his gang had heard this, they would definitely have ridiculed him. Back then, when he had treated his own gunshot wound, he hadn't even used anesthetics. Now, it was just a cut on his finger. The Almighty's words made Bojio's conscience feel uneasy. After all, the Almighty had been the one who had given her the medicine when her eyes had been infected. All right. Bojio nodded, the silver whirlpool above her head turning furry the moment she got serious. Chin Mo reached out and pressed the ahog down. In less than a second, it rose up again. Chin Mo arched a brow. Bojio smiled, showing her white canine teeth. It's time for a haircut. Don't you want to grow it out? Chin Mo's tone sounded casual. Bojio paused. I won't consider it for now. Yes. That's it? Bojio couldn't see anything from the Almighty's attitude. However, there was one thing that she was very clear about. All of her actions today were basically exposing herself. Smith's arrogance prevented him from picking up any other information. But the Almighty was not Smith. Not a single detail was left out in front of him. Her victory was in the aspect of rebirth. But Bojio knew that even this link was slowly collapsing. The Almighty was too smart. So many times he had suspected her. If one day the Almighty was no longer rational and wanted to transfer his soul, then she would really have to face his resistance and rejection. Bojio's fingers stilled. Because of this, she couldn't bring herself to talk about her childhood. At the start, she had wanted to ask the Almighty if he had any good friends when he was young. But now, she would rather he hadn't thought about it. That way, at least some decisions wouldn't be as painful. For instance, when he had to capture her personally. Bojio smiled, stretching lazily. That was why she had to run ahead of time. She didn't want to be enemies with the Almighty. According to Chin Mo's personality, after this incident, he wouldn't give her complete freedom even if he had to return home. After he boarded the Land Rover, he instructed calmly, follow young Master Gio and find out where she is going. Under normal circumstances, even if the bodyguards in black weren't by Chin Mo's side, they would be 300 meters away, just like the shadows of ancient times. They would appear whenever Chin Mo needed them. Drive to the police station. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. His fingers were still damp and cold. For some reason, it reminded him of the soft and smooth jade from before. His eyes darkened even further. There was no way the higher-ups wouldn't be aware of such a huge incident. But at the same time, Director Huang received a call. The content was, don't be so rash in the future. What if the remote operation doesn't stop? The public will be in danger. Smith will be in charge of the interrogation. That person let out a long sigh. Young Master Chin, please advise him. It's good to be driven, but he has to follow the procedure. Don't make a decision without a request. This will put us in a very passive position. If something really happens, who will take responsibility? Have you thought about it? Director Huang frowned, about to retort. All right, believe in Smith, he isn't any worse than Chin Mo. Director Huang tightened his grip when he heard the busy tone. Smith was preparing in the interrogation room. When he saw Chin Mo walk in, he glanced up. Mr. Chin, right? I've heard a lot about you, but you should have received the news. I will be in charge of the interrogation. You can listen in, but please don't disturb me, all right? Chin Mo stood tall, his gaze calm as he glanced over him. Instead of answering, he asked, have you fought many times with Z? Of course. Smith wasn't someone who showed off his abilities, he knew how to restrain himself. I'm from the 5th Avenue, everyone knows that's Z's home ground. It's hard not to fight with her. Is that so? Chin Mo lowered his body. Has she been to Jiang City before? Smith chuckled. Mr. Chin, have you forgotten? Z is in Jiang City right now. Chin Mo replied, I meant in the past. Of course not. Smith arched a brow. That's all you want to ask. His tone sounded as though Chin Mo was asking a stupid question. Chin Mo glanced at him. I have many questions. For example? Smith shrugged his shoulders. It was more or less as if he was implying that Smith had to ask some meaningful questions to be worthy of his answers. Chin Mo watched him, his tone unhurried. How many times have you lost to Z? Smith. If one had to use a word to describe Smith's current reaction, it would be as if someone had stabbed him in the chest with a knife. It was really painful. Even the expression on his face was rejecting such a question. Chin Mo replied nonchalantly, It doesn't seem easy to answer, but I've studied psychology before. From your reaction, I don't think you've won even once. This time, Smith froze. He cursed and wanted to argue with Chin Mo, but Chin Mo didn't say a word. Instead, he turned to Chin Mo and cursed. That person had already turned around to leave. His voice was still very indifferent and noble. With your level, it is indeed so. The interrogation must have been tiring. Bang! The door to the interrogation room was closed behind him. This was the first time Smith had the urge to kill someone. Bo Jio was right. Wherever the Almighty was around, his venomous tongue could cause a person to collapse. In reality, there wasn't a need for weapons. But Bo Jio hadn't expected the Almighty to use his venomous tongue to find out about her. Fortunately, she hadn't been to Jiang City before. There was something Smith wasn't aware of. Bo Jio had been to China, the Golden Triangle where the three countries met. That was where she had met with the fatal ambush. Time trickled by slowly. After separating from Chin Mo, Bo Jio thought that since she was going to accompany He Honghua to the banquet, she couldn't wear a cleaner's uniform. I need to buy a decent suit, and I need to cut my hair. The youngster stuffed a hand into her pocket, blowing at the fringe in front of her eyes. She had wanted to get a haircut before heading to the men's clothing store on the same floor to pick a suit. Who knew that as soon as she entered the shop, she would be pointed at and shouted, F***CK. F***CK. Expert. The Almighty. My savior. Bo Jio glanced at the patient. It's you. The Almighty. The thorn-head youngster had probably just gotten a haircut. His haircut was hilarious. Let's put aside the grudge between number 1 and number 2 middle school. Can you do me a favor? Bo Jio smiled lazily. I can't, I'm in a hurry to get my hair cut. The one washing hair in this store is my little brother. The thorn-head youngster was serious. Help me play a game, I'll get him to wash your hair first. Bo Jio arched a brow. Why do you have so many little brothers? We're both working and studying, it isn't easy. The thorn-head youngster acted like a gangster. Bo Jio was helpless. Use your account to play? Is it another fight for honor? It isn't honor this time. The thorn-head youngster was a little bashful. It's a girl I like, I promised to carry her in the Hero mobile game. Bo Jio didn't need to ask for the outcome. There was a huge hole in front of her and she still had to carry him. I didn't expect her to be better than me. The gangster was a little incredulous when he said this. I just told her that I need to change to a place with a better network for another round. Actually, you have to set aside some time to find someone to carry you. Bo Jio took out the cigarette she had snatched from the Almighty and tossed it to the thorn-head youngster. Get someone to wash my hair. In the future, don't go looking for trouble with first middle school, especially the girls. In the future, if you see a girl from first middle school walking along the commercial street and being targeted by thieves, you guys from second middle school have to protect her. The thorn-head youngster replied immediately, That's the work of trash. Don't worry, I'll give them an order tomorrow. Even though the students from second middle school aren't very good in their studies, we are very protective of the fairer sex. Was that how they were supposed to be protective of the fairer sex? Bo Jio arched a brow and didn't say anything else. When she lay down, she took the thorn-head youngster's phone. He stood beside her, pointing at the profile picture in his friend list. This is it, isn't she pretty? Don't snatch her from me, I'm warning you. Dearest, it's just a photoshopped picture, I really can't tell if she's pretty or not. Even if she's pretty, can she be as pretty as Almighty Chin? Bo Jio thought to herself. Even if she liked someone, she would prefer the prettiest one. What was this? If an ordinary person heard this, they would definitely feel that there wasn't any comparison. It was a guy and a girl. But he was still a Chunibyu. You don't say, young Master Chin is indeed handsome, the thorn-head youngster replied seriously. Bo Jio took the opportunity to enter the game, preparing to play casually. However, he had a request. You have to choose an assassin later. Aren't you best at playing as a tank? She still remembered the first time they had met. This Chunibyu playstyle had always been charging forward. The gangster shook his head. You don't understand. Nowadays, the girls are obsessed with playing the assassin. I don't know who started the trend. He paused. It's you. When you were in the pro league, you always played the assassin, and you always got first clears. No, let me ask you, have you ever considered the feelings of people like us? It's not good to chase after girls. Everyone talks about your Highness Jio every day. It's depressing. Bo Jio. She couldn't reply. She hadn't been to school for a long time and wasn't aware of the situation. First, she adjusted the page. Since she had chosen the assassin, she changed the attributes slightly. Then she invited him in and the game began. At this moment, the shampoo youngster had already started to apply the conditioner. Hero had always been a game that allowed for better teamwork between teammates. Bo Jio switched on the receiver but didn't turn on the microphone. She could clearly hear a girl's voice on the other side. It was from the attacking sorcerer. Hey, Qing, why do you always drag him into such a trap? He isn't a trap. The girl named Qing was playing as a tank. Bo Jio looked at the team composition. It was rather reasonable. She didn't care about what the other party said and charged straight into the opponent's jungle. What did Big Spade like to do when he was playing? Of course, it was to attack the opponent's jungle, leaving them with nothing to attack. After charging over, she didn't start fighting immediately. Instead, she hid in the bushes beside the blue beast. At this moment, the attacking sorcerer spoke again. Hey, can you come back? You only know how to send yourself to death. Don't bother about him, he's from number 2 middle school. His results aren't good and his brain isn't working well, the archer spoke. He sounded arrogant. The thorn-head youngster clenched his fists tightly but didn't say a word. Bo Jio glanced up at him. After all, she understood this Chunibyu. He was the type of person who would get angry at the slightest provocation. Yet he didn't retort? Bo Jio swept her gaze over the screen once more. Her gaze landed on the girl playing as the tank. It seemed like she really liked this person. His brain isn't bad. The tank girl's voice turned cold. If you guys continue acting like this, stop playing. The archer seemed to be afraid of the girl's anger. I'm just afraid he will send himself to death. If you don't like it, I won't say it. I'll lead you guys to victory later. The tank girl didn't reply. Instead, the attacking sorcerer spoke. I knew we wouldn't lose with you around. Almighty, lead us. No problem as long as someone doesn't send himself too far. The archer's tone was still filled with mockery. Chapter 9:26. Bo Jio swung her long sword and revealed herself. The lethality she exuded was off the charts. It was obvious that the enemy assassin hadn't expected someone to snatch the beasts at the start of the game. Caught off guard, not only did he lose the wild monster, but he was also targeted by a longsword. F***C, it can't be. He hurried towards the sorcerer in the middle lane. It was a pity. He wasn't as fast as the youngster's precise movements. She leaped up and used her big move. In just a few minutes, Bo Jio had reduced the enemy's HP to a critical level. The man gritted his teeth and finally escaped to the defense tower. However, was this the end of it? He had obviously forgotten. Before he entered the tower, the young man threw a flying dagger straight at his head. Even though he had escaped into the defense tower, the damage was still there. He wanted to return to the city as soon as he took a step. A deafening sound effect appeared in the game. First HP. A magnificent first kill. However, some noobs didn't look at the map. Before the numbers appeared, the attacking sorcerer spoke. Didn't I tell you not to send yourself to death? You must be drunk to play like this. Before she could finish her sentence, the numbers on the screen changed. 1-0. Did that mean they had killed someone? The girl's voice froze. She couldn't believe it and forgot to close her mouth. That was the first kill. And they were in the enemy's territory. With the noob's abilities, it wasn't possible. Lucky. The archer's voice was heard. The sorcerer replied immediately. He probably burned some incense before he left. Bo Jio was still running on the map. Once the enemy discovered her tracks, they would definitely chase after her. At this moment, she had killed someone and couldn't be at full HP. She was left with half a tank of HP. Once she was controlled by the sorcerer, she would be killed instantly. But with her speed and maneuvering, an ordinary person wouldn't be able to control her. At this moment, Bo Jio sent a signal to gather. The signal was sent to the sorcerer in the middle lane. Usually, the assassin would lure the enemy over. As long as the sorcerer in the middle lane cooperated, the two of them would be able to kill the enemy instantly. Bo Jio paused in the bushes, preparing to fight back. However, there was a problem. The mage girl in the middle lane didn't hear the signal at all. She didn't even look at the map coordinates and was still clearing the troops. Bo Jio was an assassin. The moment she rushed forward, she couldn't retreat in time. The opposing mage unleashed a powerful spell. Bo Jio used the strength in her fingers to turn and avoid the fatal blow. However, at this moment, it was no longer suitable to counterattack. It was just the start of the game, and she didn't have enough money or HP. Her opponent was full HP, and the map showed that reinforcements had arrived. Bo Jio turned and returned to her own tower. This time, she finally understood what it meant to be tricked. He had always played in the pro league, and his teammates would only have problems with their hand speed or technique. But this person? Bo Jio glanced at her sorcerer and archer. They didn't even know how to look at the map and didn't listen for signals. How did they get the confidence to fly with the Almighty? There was one more thing Bo Jio wanted to ask. Why was an archer shooting the blue beasts? Not fighting the red beasts, but the blue beasts? Was he trying to steal her wild? His strength was a trap for his teammates, dear. Bo Jio scanned the area and pondered for a moment. She decided to adjust her strategy. Chapter 9:27. They had to develop and strengthen their finances before they could produce equipment. That was the decision Bo Jio made after understanding the situation, which meant that she wasn't going to participate in the team battle in the near future. Everyone who played the assassin class knew how lethal an assassin could be, right? No, the long-range archers and some attacking sorcerers were the main attackers. Under normal circumstances, the assassin class not only had strict control requirements, but more importantly, they had to be able to analyze the situation. They had to know when to attack, when to retreat, and when to counterattack. The strengths of an assassin were speed and explosive power. However, if one thought that an assassin should be like a tank and only charge forward without caring about anything else, then that would be a big mistake. It was obvious that the archer and sorceress in the middle lane thought that way. When the enemy rushed over, they shouted, "Hurry, gather in the middle lane, prepare for the team battle." The defense towers on both the top and bottom lane were being attacked. At this moment, they weren't going to save the towers and were going for a team battle? Bo Jio obviously wouldn't head over immediately. She would clear the troops around the tower and hit money everywhere she went. Her hand speed was so fast that the gangster was stunned. That was what he was thinking. Why did the same account play the same game character? How did that character become so powerful in the hands of the other party? It was unbelievable. Just as Bo Jio was about to attack the defense tower after the enemy on the top lane escaped with low HP, something happened in the middle lane. The sorceress came out of the defense tower. She didn't even release a stun fireball. Instead, she used her big move. She was confident that she would be able to destroy the enemy with a big move. But it was obvious that she didn't just release her skill, she didn't measure the distance. That big move had indeed hit something, but it hadn't hit the opponent. This was really awkward. Such a low-level mistake in the game. Seriously, she didn't know what to say. She could only say that she couldn't escape. Sure enough, the opponent's assassin leaped over and gave the female sorceress a close-range critical strike. Together with a stun from the archer, the female sorceress was killed in less than 2 seconds. Bojio's 1v0 became a 1v1. It was a draw. The male archer ignored the tower and ran towards the city with full HP and mana. As he ran, he asked, "Where's the assassin? Don't you know about the team battle? Do you have to do this?" Bojio couldn't be bothered to say anything to those who abandoned their towers when they were full of health. She skimmed over from the wilderness and jumped into her defense tower. She cleared the troops, protected the tower, and earned money. She did everything without any delay. Then she jumped to the right and continued to kill monsters in the wilderness. She continued to increase her finances. Seeing this, the female magician's voice was filled with anger. "Why are you still fighting monsters at a time like this? Don't you know how to team up? Do you even know how to fight?" The girl who was playing the tank couldn't help but say, "Assassins need wild monsters the most. You guys just need to defend the tower. Don't form a party first. We don't need a party in the early stages. Then he's too much of a scammer." The female magus voice was still unhappy. "If this goes on, we'll be dragged down and lose." Bojio arched a brow as she held onto the red beasts. She only had time to type one word. It was that word that made the female magician so angry. Chapter 9:28. Forget it. The male archer turned on the voice chat. "He can do whatever he wants. We'll team up and attack the middle lane." The female sorcerer replied confidently, "H." She maneuvered her character to move forward. There were 2 opponents as well. It was the same formation, a sorcerer and an archer. The female sorcerer saw the opportunity and immediately used a big move. This time, she managed to catch someone. But the opponent sorcerer seemed to know how to play. He released a stun fireball and with the help of the archer, he knocked the female sorcerer out on the spot. The next moment, he used a big move. The female sorcerer died again. This time, the male archer didn't run because he was hit by the arrow, slowing him down. He couldn't escape even if he wanted to. Seeing that he was about to be killed to critical health. Right at this moment, a sharp blade flashed past. A small knife symbol appeared above the archer's head. The next moment, Bojio appeared like a bolt of lightning, a perfect explosive attack. In an instant, the archer's HP dropped to a critical level. At this moment, the sorcerer used another stun ball. Bojio tilted her body, dodging it perfectly. She threw a flying knife at the sorcerer before sweeping her long sword. Both the archer and sorcerer were on the verge of death. At this moment, their lives were hanging by a thread. Bojio just needed one more move and she would be able to take both lives easily. However, the male archer wasn't aware of the situation and continued to attack fiercely. Coincidentally, it was shot by him just like that. The game's music blared. Double kill. The screen showed that the 2 lives were taken by the male archer. Hence, the female sorcerer's tone became even more eccentric. "Look, that's the Almighty. He should learn from some traps and just charge recklessly. It's fine, I'll be watching from the back. Even if he charges into the crowd, he'll still be able to survive." The male archer really believed that he had taken the credit for the double kill. This kid seemed to have forgotten who had saved him when he was almost killed. Why was it the other way around? Bojio glanced over at the thorn-head youngster. Where did he come from? Is that how they play? He's from number 1 middle school. The gangster clenched his fist. That's why I don't like these students from number 1 middle school. But I have to admit that he's very good at playing games. Bojio's lips twitched. You call this good at gaming? He just got a double kill, the gangster said seriously. Bojio arched a brow, her tone calm. He won't have the chance to kill again. Why? The gangster didn't understand. Bojio moved her fingers, clearing another wave of soldiers. Without me, he would have been killed. It was a fitting scene. The moment Bojio finished her sentence, news of someone being wiped out came from the middle lane. This time, it was the opponent who got the double kill. The score changed from 3-2 to 3-4. It was obvious that Bojio's team was lagging behind. Not only that, but they also destroyed one of their defense towers. Even the second defense tower was only left with half of its original structure. Fortunately, there was still the girl who played the tank. After returning to her position, she defended the half wall of the tower. The male archer was rather humble. "It's my fault this time, I made a mistake." The female sorcerer immediately said, "It's okay to die once, everyone makes mistakes, unlike some noob who is still fighting in the wilderness while we are in a team battle." But just as the female sorcerer said this, another sound effect played. Bojio killed someone in the wilderness, successfully tying the score to 4-4. "We're really lucky to meet someone with low HP," the male archer said as he looked at the map. His tone was slightly sinister. The female sorcerer was full of disdain. "It's all because you and I beat the opponent to low HP, allowing some noob to take advantage of the situation. No wonder he had to team up with us, he wanted to take advantage of us." Just as she was saying this, Bojio led the troops and jumped to the bottom of the defense tower. Successfully destroying the second defense tower on the top lane. Then, she maneuvered her character into the jungle and disappeared again. Other than hiding in the bushes, what else does this noob know? That's enough. The female sorcerer was still commenting. The male archer was still confident. "Ignore him, I'm here, there's no need to be afraid." Hence, the two of them started to charge forward. This time, the opponent was alone. It was a 2v1 and the opponent didn't know how to play. The female sorcerer successfully swept the opponent and took a life. "Noob, watch out, this is called a game." As she spoke, she took a step forward. A line of words appeared on the screen. "Tyrant King has been killed." Killing the Tyrant King in the wilderness would double the team's finances and experience. This was beneficial to the entire team. The one who killed the Tyrant King wasn't anyone else. It was the noob that the female sorcerer was talking about, Bojio. Did Spades's FC King come for nothing? Whenever they wanted to clear a dungeon, they would specially choose the difficult hidden bosses. That was why they shocked Zone C time and time again. At this moment, the male archer was still speaking. "It's normal for an assassin to kill a Tyrant King. If I was an assassin, I would have killed the Beast King by now." Bojio replied calmly, "You can give it a try and see how long you can last before being killed by the Beast King." The male archer could tell that she was being sarcastic. His anger rose. "What do you mean? Are you trying to say that I'm not a good player and that I'm a noob?" Under normal circumstances, no one would reply to his question since they had to be careful. But when the word "yes" appeared on the screen, the male archer wanted to curse. "Hee, everyone can see who's the noob. What about you? You aren't even participating in the team battle. What right do you have to criticize others? Don't listen to him, let's go kill the Beast King. There are 4 of us now, it'll be easy." Was that really the case? They walked over. Bojio sent a message to retreat. Unfortunately, only the girl who was playing the tank hesitated for a moment. The rest of them surrounded the wild Dominator boss. The Beast King was stronger than the Tyrant in terms of attack power and HP, making it harder to attack in the early stages. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that the other party had probably gone to the Beast King. As expected, Bojio hurriedly turned invisible and retreated. But it was too late. The female sorcerer and male archer had been eliminated in this wave of team battle. Fortunately, the Beast King hadn't been killed yet. The other party was still fighting. Everyone knew that the Beast King would belong to the one who dealt the last blow. This was what people often referred to as snatching the Beast King. Bojio hid in the bushes, calculating the Beast King's HP. At the crucial moment, a knife flew over. Chapter 929. Everyone knew what the consequences of this slash would be. The last attack was full of explosive power. It directly stole the Dominator boss that the other side had worked so hard to defeat and successfully captured the Wyvern. Damn, is the assassin on the other side using a cheat code? How can you snatch it like this? I've already been killed by him twice. I feel so wronged. Don't be so long-winded. Kill him first. There were 5 Dominator bosses, but none of them had full HP. But there were tanks, long-range shooters, and team control sorcerers, all of them surging towards her. Bo Gio glanced at the map on her phone but didn't turn back. The reason was simple. There were 2 people on the way back. One was a tank, and the other was a mage. Going back was basically suicide. He moved sideways towards the opponent's wilderness, making use of the bushes and walls in the wilderness to perfectly avoid the long-range cannons fired by the archer. This kid is too bold. Stop him, we must stop this assassin. However, Bo Gio wasn't going to let them catch her so easily. When she escaped, she didn't forget to throw a flying dagger at them. 2 people were sent flying in a row, and both of them were slowed down by her. He was about to escape. The young man raised his hand, and the towel he was using to dry his hair accidentally covered the young man's eyes. Bo Gio's first reaction was that it was over. As expected, the resurrected teammates didn't give her any support. They were separated by a wall. One of them was low on HP, while the other was half HP. Both of them had used their ultimate moves on her. In other words, if their archers and mages attacked together, their opponents would be helpless. But no one cooperated. No one even tried to save her. When Bo Gio sat up, the character on her phone had already revived in the city center. The female mage was still unhappy. Everyone's back. Why did you rush in alone? You'll be surrounded. Li Shui, he stole the Dominator boss. Did you only see him being surrounded? Did you not see him steal the boss? The tank girl was really angry this time. You're the one who used your skills the wrong way, not him. The sorceress paused for a moment, then said in an indifferent tone, So, Qing, you still think I'm wrong? Then let him fight on his own. Let's see how many times he'll be surrounded and killed. What the sorceress didn't expect was that when she said those words, Kieran's voice suddenly rang out. Bo Gio really went alone. At the very least, there were wyverns at the front and troops at the back. It was equivalent to having a tank to help her resist the tower. The defense tower at the bottom lane had been turned into an empty shell by Bo Gio. The male archer was still in the middle lane. You don't want to join us and still insist on taking the wrong path. I know, the female magus snorted coldly. Looking at the map, the 5 people on the opposite side were all heading towards the pit. He added, They're basically looking for death, all right? No, something's wrong. Instead, someone from the opposing side reacted. It was because he usually watched the pro scene, but now he only paid attention to one thing. That was, the income of this assassin was more than double of theirs. In other words, with the same game character, the opponent's attack power would be much higher than theirs. Don't go. Before he could finish his sentence, the game's music blared. Oh, 1 kill. Look, he's dead. The female magus shrugged. And you still say you're not a scammer. But as soon as she finished speaking, her expression changed. That was because the second announcement sounded in the game. Double kill. Double kill? What did that mean? The person who had died wasn't the pit, but the opponent? That wasn't all. The pit had killed 2 of their players in one go, even when he was surrounded by 5 people. The male archer was calm. It's just a double kill, he won't be able to escape anymore. But his luck isn't too bad. The male archer wanted to give the female magus and himself a way out, attributing everything to luck. But Bo Gio wasn't going to give them the chance to argue. She retreated, hiding behind the bushes. The opponent was still shouting, F***CK, he actually dodged it again. Where's the tank? It can enlarge, squat him. The one who said this was the only DPS on the other side. He didn't know that the moment he finished speaking, the assassin who had been running to the right shook. After changing his body shape, he stuck close to Bo Gio and swept her across. All of a sudden, the third in-game sound effect rang out. Free kill. But that wasn't the end. Bo Gio tilted her body, the flying knife piercing through, reducing the speed. The opponent's assassin couldn't even walk, much less escape. With a swoosh, the sword landed. 4 kill. This time, the sound effect was different. Be it the other party or the hairdresser, both of them were dumbfounded. The Thornhead youngster's jaw dropped. Ditch that works too? Each, Bo Gio replied, her fingers twirling. The thornhead youngster reminded her, "Aren't you leaving? He's in critical condition." The opponent was a tank, he couldn't move. "I won't leave with a dragon." Bo Gio's phone switched back and forth, she seemed to be changing equipment. The image that flashed by made the thornhead youngster dizzy. The thornhead youngster rubbed his temples. "Why are you still fighting when he's in critical condition? He's a tank. He doesn't have any big moves left," Bo Gio replied faintly. The thornhead youngster was confused. Seriously? How could she remember that? How could she let him have a good time? "Sometimes, you won't die if you don't escape," Bo Gio said, charging forward with her sword. She swept across, catching the opponent off guard. The tank didn't have time to react and was already in critical condition. At first, he thought it was over. After all, the city center was behind him. As long as he returned to the city, he would be back to full HP. Unexpectedly, at the moment when he walked back to the city, a flying knife directly stabbed at him. 5 consecutive kills. The thornhead youngster took a deep breath when he saw this. The female sorcerer and male archer froze on the spot. After all, everyone could hear the sound effect in the game. It was a 1v5 and he was surrounded on the high ground, but he still managed to kill 5 consecutive kills. This time, they couldn't say anything about the opponent relying on luck. The atmosphere was awkward. Everything in front of them, including the tall figure standing in the middle of the screen and the shattered city, was a harsh slap to their faces. They won the match. They didn't just win. Everyone felt as though they had been put on a show by the assassin in black. Especially the last 5 consecutive kills on the high ground. The opponent couldn't help but ask Bo Gio to be his disciple. Bo Gio didn't agree, returning the phone to its original owner. She looked at herself in the mirror, deep in thought. It wasn't an easy match. There were even a few times when she had to escape to save her life. She wasn't like this when she was in a professional match, because no matter where she appeared, the team would rush to support her. She didn't need to escape, she just needed to cut in quickly and accurately. It was especially so when she was in a team with the Almighty. Bo Gio thought about it. She roughly understood what Fengyi meant when he said, "You still need to train more." When playing hero, one person could indeed carry the entire field, but really sports wasn't a single-player game. It was to be like the Almighty, who could carry the entire field when he was alone and could coordinate well in a team battle. It seemed like before the National League. It was time to change what she lacked the most. On the other side, the silver-haired youngster stood up with a smile. On the other side, the thornhead youngster pondered for a moment before opening the WeChat discussion group. With a flushed face, he said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't the one who played the previous round. I'm not good as an assassin, but I can play as a tank. Even if it's a pit, I can block in front of you and give you time to escape. What I mean is, are you still willing to play with me?" In reality, if the thornhead youngster hadn't said it, no one would have known he had found someone else to play for him. After all, everyone was still immersed in the shocking quintuple kill just now. But to the thornhead youngster, he didn't have a single good point. He wasn't good at his studies, and even though he looked good, he wasn't smart. He liked to be the boss, and even in games, he couldn't beat the boss of number 1 middle school. The latter was a huge blow to him. You guys wouldn't understand the hatred between number 2 middle school and number 1 middle school. Who was better? It was a matter of pride. In comparison, he wasn't as good-looking as the youngster. After all, pretty boys were trending nowadays. A tough guy like him wasn't cute. But he knew there was something he had to follow. Things should be as they were. He wanted to act cool. Hence, when he saw the youngster, he wanted to win. But at that time, he had thought it through. If he won, he would tell the youngster the truth. Even if he was a bastard, he wouldn't lie to the girl he liked. That was also the reason why Bo Gio felt this Chunibu was worth befriending. The WeChat discussion group went silent for a second. The next second, the sorcerer girl, Li Shui's voice popped out. "I knew it. How can a pit like you play so well? Playing games requires intelligence. Li Shui, don't make things difficult for the students from number 2 middle school. It's not easy to find someone to play for him. It was obvious that the person who said this was the male archer. The thorn-head youngster clenched his fists. Bo Gio glanced over. This is the second time you have to control your temper. I can't help it, they are friends. When the thorn-head youngster lowered his head, he looked like a large dog. Otherwise, with my temper, do you think I wouldn't beat them up? Hee, it's an insult to my reputation as the boss of number 2 middle school. Bo Gio arched a brow but didn't reply. Just then, a voice came from the other side. Where you now? Outside. The thorn-head youngster's voice was still muffled. Come to my house. The girl's voice was cold, but the words she said were warm. Who wants you to be good at games? Hurry up and study with me. You don't want to go to university anymore, do you? The thorn-head youngster's eyes lit up. I'm going over now. The girl was obviously trying to get back at the thorn-head youngster. Some people are indeed smart, but remember, I like people like you who are a little dumb and a little pit. The thorn-head youngster nodded continuously. Bo Gio seemed to be able to see a certain Chunibu's ears pricking up. Seriously? Did his lackeys from number 2 middle school know about him? But, from your tone, you two seem to know each other? We live in the same district, but we weren't familiar with each other in the past. We only got to know each other after a while. With that, the thorn-head youngster turned and patted Bo Gio's shoulder. I heard that you like young Master Chin to the point of insanity. But you still haven't moved his heart, right? Bo Gio. Who did you hear that from? Is that how you use the adjective crazy? To be honest, I used to despise people like you. What's that called again? The thorn-head youngster frowned. But you are different, you aren't a sissy at all. As the boss of No. 2 middle school, I shouldn't be talking to you about this since destroying you has always been our school's plan. But this time, it's different. I feel that there's something wrong with number 1 middle school recently. Don't always chase after your almighty and forget your mission as the boss of number 1 middle school. Bo Gio. What did he mean by mission as the boss of number 1 middle school? This was a conversation between a Chunibu. What problem? Bo Gio asked casually. The thorn-head youngster caressed his chin. Someone wants to buy the trending searches. It's the girl who played with us just now. Buy the trending searches? Bo Gio frowned. Why would a high school student want to buy the trending searches? The thorn-head youngster shrugged. I don't know the details, but I know who her target is. It's a web novelist who seems to be depressed. Bo Gio glanced up. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you an esports idol? The thorn-head youngster pouted. An idol has to display his strength and let the people who like you learn from him. Someone should believe your words. My girlfriend likes that web novelist quite a bit. Bo Gio arched a brow. Your girlfriend? The girl who played with Tank just now. Isn't she pretty? The thorn-head youngster asked shyly. Bo Gio replied lazily. She just asked you to go home for tuition. How did she become your girlfriend? Didn't you hear her say she likes me? The thorn-head youngster shook his head. Forget it. Someone like you who doesn't get confessed to often wouldn't understand. Bo Gio. Honestly, this isn't the only problem in number 1 middle school. As the top student in the school, you probably don't realize it. Anyway, it's quite troublesome. The thorn-head youngster revealed another piece of information. Previously, I saw someone from number 1 middle school with the local tyrant. He seems to be a mistress and is helping the other party to do something. The local tyrant seems to be doing a big business recently. In short, it's very profitable. But the dangerous thing is, when I went to socialize with my old man, I heard him say that as long as he took down the school, he would earn more than that. Speaking of which, aren't the students from number 1 middle school all dumb geese who only know how to study? Why is it more chaotic than number 2 middle school? It didn't seem to be important, but it revealed a lot of information. Bo Gio memorized everything without batting an eyelid. She stuffed her hands into her pockets and glanced at the clock hanging on the wall. I have something on, I have to go. All right, the thorn-head youngster replied. When I go to socialize again, I'll help you look after the students from number 1 middle school. I don't want you to die before I can even fight with you, benefactor. After Bo Gio left, someone in the WeChat group asked, who was the assassin just now? I recorded it and posted it online. Someone said that the assassin was so cool. Can you tell me who it was? The Thornhead youngster thought for a moment before typing an ID. Spade Z. In an instant, the WeChat group exploded. Spade Z? Oh my god. It's actually my Highness Geo. Is he still there? Is he still there? I want to confess. No wonder he got the first kill in the first match. It's indeed my Big Spade style. He even stole the dragon. He's so shameless, so cool. He must be really depressed. That's why when Big Spade is around, don't fight the dragon, it'll ruin your life. Li Shui just said that Big Spade is a scammer. Li Shui, who was called out, paused for a moment, then said, it's just a game. Of course, professional players play better than us normal players. To be honest, I don't know all of these esports players, but I don't really like them. It's not that I'm being biased, but I just feel that these people are leading the students astray. Instead of studying, they're always playing games. It's not good to be addicted to games. The Thornhead youngster didn't get angry at all. After hearing her words, he turned on the voice chat. Student Li Shui, think about it before you speak. Who is the number one in number one middle school? It's the person who doesn't study properly. Spade Z is an esports player, but in your words, he's addicted to games. How dare you say he's not biased? If you think games aren't good, you don't have to play because it only shows the bad side. On the other hand, there are people who work hard and never give up. Even if they score 0, they can still shine in the esports arena. If you don't understand this logic, shut up. Qing, this is the person you said you like? That's enough. How can you be so rude? Li Shui sneered. Qing also turned on the voice chat, her tone unhurried. If speaking the truth is rude, then we can't do anything about it. Li Shui paused. She didn't expect the other party to put her in such a difficult position. She threw down a sentence. You really learn from the people you interact with. Then she went offline. She had more important things to do. There was no need to argue with them. Just like that, the entire incident seemed to have calmed down, but in fact, the darkness was just starting to descend. It was written in a book that the human heart was scarier than ghosts. And no one could predict the human heart. Time trickled by. At the largest garden-style hotel in Jiang City, there was a gathering for businesswomen. For such an annual gathering, the guests were all successful and reputable women in Rivertown. They weren't just rich, they had to be classy. Hence, as long as one was from Rivertown, he or she would want to attend such a gathering. The place was filled with fresh flowers, all wooden decorations. There was a piano in the middle, a champagne tower placed high, and on the wooden table covered with a white tablecloth, besides candles, there were all sorts of fruits. Not far away, there was a chef making pastries and some barbecued meat. This meant that people could order whatever they wanted to eat on the spot. In the past, He Honghua didn't have the right to attend this gathering. It wasn't because she wasn't rich enough, but because the other party invited Su Mei. This time, He Honghua attended because she was clear that she had to do something at the right time. Her Jiao was already a professional esports player. She was bound to become more and more popular in the future, to the point that almost all the students were talking about her. Because of this, she couldn't step back. She didn't want people to say, look, that's her. Her mother came from the countryside, and she's a shrew who can't even write. When people talked about Jiao, they would say, look at that person. Humans were just that weird. In the past, He Honghua never cared about what others said about her. But once her child was involved, everything changed. It didn't matter what her family background was. But she didn't want such things to become a burden to her Jiao. He Honghua had always been a carefree person. This time, she put on makeup for the first time. She even went to find a stylist just to look presentable. She had dressed up in the past, but no matter how she dressed up, she couldn't shake off the title of shrew in such a place. He Honghua was still hesitating, wondering if she should go in. A tall and slender figure walked over from her left, reaching out to place a hand on her shoulder. The youngster had a clean and faint smile. Mom, why aren't you going in? Why are you standing here? Bo Jiao was dressed in a well-ironed white suit with a bow on her collar. Her lips were lifted, her bright eyes and white teeth making her look like a prince. There weren't many people who could resist a suit of this color, but Bo Jio seemed to be born with a demonic aura. Even though it was white, she could still exude a devilish aura. It was very attractive. Even He Honghua felt that her Jio was so handsome that it made her blush. Her round face broke into a smile, filled with delight. Bo Jio arched a brow, bending her arm into an arc. "Let's go, madam," he enter. He Honghua had never been invited like this before. She paused for a moment, then clumsily moved her arm forward. "Madam He, be more confident. Trust me, your Jio is so handsome, it will definitely give you extra points." Bo Jio's face didn't blush when she said this. Her heart wasn't racing. Instead, there was a smile on her beautiful face. She was really narcissistic. But because of this sentence, He Honghua's heart wasn't as chaotic and uneasy as when she had first arrived. "Yes, be more confident. She was here to eat." Bo Jio glanced over as she walked, observing He Honghua's side profile. When she saw the smile, her lips lifted. He Honghua still had to ask, "What did you do today? I didn't see you at the club. Your teammates said you weren't training today." Bo Jio wasn't going to tell He Honghua about defusing the bomb. She reached out and tugged her suit, smiling devilishly. "I went to buy this and even got a haircut. I'm going to accompany Madam He to the banquet. How can I not bring my own equipment to carry the crowd?" He Honghua laughed. "You child." The moment they entered, they caught everyone's attention. "You're tuning in to the Passion Page's YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."